right now. So if Matt, if you were going to insult me, you missed your shot.
Uh, well, hello everyone. I'm one of the
Hello,
panelists.
hello. Welcome back to the Lovecraft Easing podcast.
I'm one of the panelists, Matt Carpenter, the only panelist today.
Matt
Mm,
Carpenter, the only
Wait, let me
panelist
let me
today.
turn off your.
The only panelist
There
today.
we go.
uh I have a prize today. If you remember, I was on the panel about birds at Necronomicon, and I ended up reading a lot of books about bird horror. This is one of them. It's called Plague of Gulls. It's by
Really?
an author that is named Stephen Gregory, who's well known in circles other than ours. And if you want to win a copy of this novel, all you have to do is send an email to easingprizes@gmail.com and put goals in the subject line. We draw a winner. Usually it's 6 to 8 weeks later. And if you enter, maybe you'll be getting this book.
There's a winner every time we do an episode. So, as my
And the
longtime
winner
listeners
is
know,
usually you getting to listen to me. So that's good.
that's not how I see it, but that's okay.
Everyone wins. They're all winners.
Exactly. If you're listening and not watching, later on, my guest today is Victoria Dalpe. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Victoria
Yeah, it used
Dalpe.
to have the accent after the E, and it, like 2 generations ago or so, it was
Okay.
lost.
All right.
Seems pretentious to bring it back now. So.
That's okay. Be pretentious. like those. I don't. It's Jennifer with a Jenyfer. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the tragedies. the Tragediegh, I believe is how that one is spelled. That's just a nightmare. No offense to any tragedies listening on there.
Yes. Well, anyway, Victoria emailed me a couple of months ago about her then upcoming, and it's out now, I believe.
Yep,
Yeah.
September.
Her book, Selene Shade, Resurrectionist for Hire. And it's going to be the first in a series, right?
Yep. So one of three. They are scheduled to roll out each fall. So they'll be out. This one just came out in September, and in a perfect world, they'll keep rolling out in Septembers for the next 2 more years.
2 more years. So you plan on it being trilogy, and that
Yep.
leave it there. Okay. Well, I want to read something real quick from our friend Laird Barron, and he read the book. He writes, Dalpe wields literary black magic yet again. Cool, sardonic, and asking the big pointed questions about life, unlife, and death. Selene Shade, Resurrectionist for Hire, kicks off what promises to be a tremendous new series. Laird Barron, author of Not a Speck of Light, which I hope everyone owns by now. So
I have my copy. I have not read it yet, but I do have it.
That's important. And so you don't have to take my word for it that it's a good book, is what I'm trying to say. Laird thinks it's a good book too. So, but would you give us a spoiler-free synopsis of what the book is about, Victoria?
Sure. So I wrote it. I'd been writing a lot of horror and kind of came up writing horror. And my first novel was very much like in the Gothic horror tradition. And then I had a short story collection come out 2 years ago called La Femme Grotesque, which was kind of just like a celebration of like horror subgenres with like kind of a feminist slant. And so I read a lot of crime fiction, I read a lot of kind of urban fantasy fiction and different other types of horror, and I thought it'd be fun to try to merge them, essentially to get as weird, kind of like Lovecraft mythosy weird,
Right.
within that framework, to see like how strange could I make this and it still fit in that subgenre, and also like how dark could I go with that in the same way. And so the concept for the book is, in this world, magic exists in certain ways. My protagonist is a resurrectionist, so by profession, she raises the dead for money, and then those dead are brought into. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Oh, great, thank you.
Philip, it's not your turn.
He'll be back another time in the guest starring role.
I actually,
yeah, he grabbed. I realized I left my copy of the book downstairs, so I was like, "Can you run it up?"
oh, what a good
Cover
husband.
here with a lovely design by Daniela Batsheva,
Yes.
and I believe she will be doing all three. So they will
That's
kind of have.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
so
love
cool.
the cover. She did an amazing job. Anyway, so we've got a resurrectionist. She is the protagonist. She brings people back from the dead. The police contact her because they need some help with a series of murders that have been confounding them. And it looks like she is more connected to them than she had initially planned. And so through the book, she is kind of avoiding and not wanting to be the central character. She's a curmudgeonly kind of isolated person as someone who just deals with dead bodies all the time. It would be. And and all sorts of strange things from other dimensions and realities and magic are all kind of happening. And it's kind of a fun time.
Can I ask, so at least when you said she's a resurrectionist, I thought two ways I don't know anything about, I have not read the book yet, but
I did the homework,
just
but
resurrect like
whatever.
a person for a period of time so that you can say, where are the insurance papers? Or is it actually bringing someone back to life because you'd have to clear up all their ailments? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. So they are going back into their life. They live in society and are classified as what's called a half-life. And so they live as just people and they work and they have their lives. And so because it is quite expensive, there's a class component to it. And a lot of the people who are coming back are either very old or had a disease that, like cancer or something. And so there is a stigma attached to these people, but it's better than being dead for a lot of them. So the society is still coming to terms with the fact that these people are in it. And so it's the main character, Selene, she is very conflicted sometimes about sending everyone back out into the world. Like, is she doing the right thing, or is she kind of dooming these people to kind of a miserable second existence kind of thing, and
Yeah.
also profiting off of it is a big kind of question
Yeah.
So
for that character.
is she the only one in the area, or are there like a few other people in the world who can do what she does? Or is it
Yeah, there's not a lot of them. And so it's very rare. And so she runs a little boutique business. And at the start of the book, her partner, who was also her mentor, has just died. So she is alone and a little overworked for one person. So she's going to need to hire an apprentice, and she's not looking forward to that because she's going to have to train someone. And then there's one other resurrection house in town that's kind of her competition, but they're not a lot. So there's like a few hundred in America, let's say, and
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, that's
A couple questions. One from me, couple of comments and questions from the audience. On the Sunday shows, it starts off like right now as a live show. And then once it's over, that YouTube link I gave you will be good for people to watch it later. But my point is, there are people watching live. One of them says this is a cool concept for the book. And Jakester wants to know, is there any feminist cosmic horror that you would recommend? So
feminist cosmic horror.
well, I would say this kind of qualifies too, wouldn't you?
Well, I thought that would be cheating if I was like, well, obviously
No.
me.
Yeah, you should read this one, Jakester. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely me. I think Nadia Bulkin is always, if you're not reading her, I think she's an obvious number one for that. I think
Very talented and a really wonderful person.
Yeah, just love her work and her kind of perspective. So I would definitely say Nadia Bulkin. I think Molly Tanzer is also a great one to be looking at for sure. It's a husband and wife duo, but I really like Alona Andrews. And they wrote a couple series, but the Kate Daniels book series, which is mammoth. I mean, there's like 13 books in the core series and then a million shoot up. And that one's kind of a fun future series but it's a future where all technology has been destroyed, and so they are actually kind of all blacksmiths, and magic is back, and pretty much any kind of monster you can think of exists in this world, and
Yeah.
it's a fun, and the protagonist is really a great character. So those I would really recommend, especially if you like a lot of different like world monsters, because they really pull from all over the place, and a lot of kind of cool magic. I really like their vampires too. They're totally bizarre, like a left field interpretation of vampirism that I really liked.
Yeah. I'll cheat too and say that a book I edited, Autumn Cthulhu, has some wonderful cosmic horror stories. One of them is by Nadia Bolkin in the book. So yeah, Jakester, if you haven't read that, check that out. Um, I know what I was going to ask too. You mentioned being a
Right,
fan.
Mike, can I mention two books so we're on this subject?
Absolutely.
There are two
And hi, Mark. Hi,
anthologies.
Mark. Mark Rainey just joined.
Yeah, stop talking, Mark. Anyway, there are two books that, if you're interested in that sort of thing, Casilda's Song, edited by Joe Pulver, is a wonderful anthology of King and Yellow stories, all written by women.
Yes.
It was a beautiful book. And then there was a book called She Walks in Shadows, edited
Oh
by
yeah, that's a really good
Vivian
one. Yeah, I have that.
Garcia. I think it's been reissued in paperback and renamed Cthulhu's Daughters, but it's the same book.
Yeah.
So there are, if you want to look around, you can certainly find specific anthologies of women authors in this field. You just gotta keep looking.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing those out, Matt. And hello to Mark Rainey.
How do?
How do? What I was going to ask you is you're a fan of crime fiction, you said. Um, what are some of your favorites? I like the Matthew Scudder series by Lawrence Block, for example. That's one of mine. And I like the Charlie Parker series by John Connolly because not only is it great crime fiction and he's a wonderful writer, but there's also an element of the paranormal that just kind of peeks in a lot, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, anything with kind of a supernatural, even sometimes it doesn't turn out to actually be in that a la Scooby-Doo kind of way. That I love. I just feel like paranormal fiction and crime fiction go together. They're like peanut butter and jelly. It's just like the perfect,
Absolutely.
because often you're dealing with underworlds, you're dealing with people who are operating behind the scenes, subculture, and so it just naturally lends itself that you're always going to these secret clubs, you're meeting this mysterious guy. It's often about an object, or, you've got the MacGuffin that everyone's looking for. And so that being a magical object, or, that it's like secret cults, Illuminati stuff, it just lends itself so well. So yeah, I definitely tend to lean in that way.
Yeah.
Like I'm very partial to, a lot of the really old noir, and the first book that popped into my head was Darker Than You Think. Oh, why is it? Was it Williamson?
Why does that ring a bell?
It's old. Why am I blanking on the author's name?
I'll Google it.
Something. I want to say it's something Williams.
Jack Williamson.
Yes, and I love that one. Is again that just kind of classic old school. It has a dame. She's up to no good. Maybe magical, or shapeshifters.
You gotta watch out for those dames.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I love a femme fatale. I just love a pencil mustached, troublemaker.
Wow,
So
I gotta
that
read
idea.
this. I don't.
It's really,
think I've
it's
gotten
good.
to this, yeah.
And it holds up really well. I want to say it was written in like 57 or something, but again, I'm ill prepared, so I probably could find it if I dug
No,
around
that's
behind.
okay.
Actually, we want to go back to your book.
Yeah, we will go back to your book, but
You're
you
not
just
done talking about your book, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I just well, one of the things about this podcast is we meander, and I thought I got rid of you, Langan.
I was gonna say, is that a little Langan that popped up there
That's
in
a
the
little
corner in the
Langan.
darkness?
Well, I heard you talking about femme fatales and pencil mustaches,
Just
and I was
popped
like,
up.
sign me. It's like Beetlejuice. It's a
Yeah.
little more, the combination of words is a little more obscure and arcane, but yeah.
Yep. And they set it up that way to stop you from coming, but it backfired.
Yeah, little did they, I was like, oh, hang on, they're having Victoria Dalpe on. If anybody will say femme fatale and pencil mustache, it is she.
Yeah, you play your cards right, you get a femme fatale with a pencil mustache. So you never know.
That's, yeah, I've seen that movie.
Not my dream, but whatever floats your boat,
With a little work, we could get a pencil mustache on John there. In fact, let me see. I've got a Sharpie here.
Yeah,
he is the villain of the podcast
on the screen.
So.
I think of myself more as the misunderstood hero of the podcast.
Okay. A lot of villains think of themselves that way.
Yeah, so nobody ever thinks they're the bad guy in their own story. There's that great Mitchell and Webb look sketch where they're in the full black.
Oh yeah, the
World War
Nazis.
II,
Yeah,
and they have the skulls on their hats, and one guy's leaning to the other, and he was like, "Are we the bad guys?" And like, no. And he's like, "Yeah, but we have skulls as our logo." And he's like, "I don't think that's a good guy's logo. I think that's
awesome.
the bad guy's logo." And it's a great, and they're both sitting there in the trenches, like, I mean, yeah, it does seem like we might be the bad guys. So.
That's great. Would you, if you had, the labels aren't always, but if you had to stick a label on this book, like you're at a party and someone says, "Hey, what kind of book is it?" Would it be fair to say urban fantasy? I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but
yeah, I think that it would like kind of urban fantasy or dark contemporary fantasy. I think the only reason I would have that little bit of reluctance about urban fantasy is that it has such a stigma of being women's fiction, I guess, a lot of times, and or a certain kind of popcorn genre component to it which I disagree. And I think there's a lot of really good and substantial urban fantasy out there. But I do think it gets a little bit of a bad rap in the way that horror gets a bad rap in certain circles, and why it has to get repackaged as like a thriller because some circle won't read it. And it's like, right, you read crime fiction about people like wearing each other's skin, and that's fine. But like, as soon as it's called horror, there's like something off-putting about it. And I would also say the same thing about mythos or like Lovecraftian fiction now. I think it feels like very fan fiction-y or kind of tropey. And I think there's some really interesting and good stuff that can come out of it, but the way that it's marketed can be, I don't know, can hurt it sometimes, is the long-winded answer.
That's true. That's true. There are also, in my view, there's a cosmic horror element to this book. I can't say too much without a spoiler, but would you agree?
Yeah. No, I think so. I was trying to sneak it in. So I snuck it in, and to see how out there I could go with this and keep people kind of on the train.
Right. Well, can we talk about the plot just a little bit without getting into spoilers? And Mark, John, Matt, please, anytime you want to comment or ask Victoria a question, please jump in. But there's a string of murders around the city. They're young women. The police think it might be ritualistic, right? If I'm remembering everything correctly. And then a detective seeks Selene's help, and he's not an ordinary detective either. But I'll let you take over this.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to do in this book was create a magic system. And I'd always wanted to, and it took me a long time trying to think of what I would do differently, or if I was going to create a different magic system. So within this world, there's a lot of different types of practitioners. So there's necromancers, are like a large group, and they practice a very specific type of magic, like death magic, and anyone can do it. If you can figure out how to do it, you could do it. And then there are like witches and different types of witches, and they kind of have inborn abilities. The resurrectionists are their own thing, and they all have different flavors of magic, but each of them has worked on trying to create some sort of an undead or reborn or kind of reanimated creature. So each one has has been playing with death magic type thing. So within the book, there's a lot of having to kind of research what kind of ritual this would be and who would be doing it and why they would be doing it. And that's kind of where you end up getting larger kind of feel for the world and the characters as they're doing that sort of investigation and kind of checking with all the different types of magical groups,
Right.
which in this I call tribes, which I totally stole from Clive Barker because I love Cabal and I love monster cities, and so that was just a little love note to him that the supernatural groups call themselves tribes.
Yeah.
So can I ask, so this magic has sort of been with the world for as far back as we can go, and I guess the techniques that she uses have just probably painstakingly been developed over decades and decades of people experimenting, trial and error. And
So the difference between the resurrectionists and pretty much all of the other magics is actually that they don't have to do as much. There is almost no ritual at all. Like they can just naturally do this, and they're kind of born with the ability. And also because like witchcraft and any of this, none of this was popular. They were all just kind of burnt at the stake, and everyone was afraid of them for most of human time. So within this society, it's only been about 30 years or so that the world is more welcoming to this stuff existing, or even admitting it's existing, or trying to find legal pathways for these people to exist without being,
Interesting parallel to racism
executed.
and so forth.
Yeah, which I wanted, it was intentional, but I also really dislike when that is played too heavily. Like I think specifically about True Blood. Whereas I think it was a lighter touch in the books, the Charlene Harris, I can't remember the first one. One Foot in the Grave, maybe, but any of the Suki Stackhouse books that
Right.
HBO made into their show, True Blood, they leaned really heavy into that to the point of like the TV show where it was like the whole God hates fangs thing, like, and they leaned heavily into the like vampires to gay people. And I don't love that because they actually, they did kill people and they were problematic. Like the vampires were problematic. So I don't love when that is too
Right.
like I
It's
wanted
not
to
a good
play with
analogy
those,
because they're
right? Because
causing
like these
harm.
people
Yeah.
are not monsters,
Right.
right? And so I think sometimes that can be a little clunky. So I wanted to work from that, but I didn't want it to be a one-to-one. But more thinking like already people have issues with all of this and segregation and things. So can you imagine how they would react to literal zombies now in their neighborhoods or going to their bathrooms or whatever, like that idea of actually it's more just taking it up a notch of even more things that certain subsets of the population would be very, very upset by, or feeling like this society is going off the rails or to hell or whatever.
Yeah.
The second book is much more heavily religious. Like the main conflict is with a religious organization that's kind of moving into like a terrorist organization. Kind of like a Westboro Baptist, if
Yeah.
they wanted to like start hunting monsters kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. By the way, I've not read the books, but I've seen some of the TV episodes, and just right off the bat in that first episode of True Blood, there are some really interesting characters that you're like, man, these guys are fascinating, and you want to root for them right away.
yeah, it's a fun series, and the show, it jumps its shark hard, but they also made some good choices. The character of Lafayette dies in the books very, very early. Sorry, spoiler for like a 20-year-old book. I don't know, but like in the show, it becomes a really pivotal, like super important character, and I feel
Right.
like that was a good instinct to keep that character and actually let them grow. And I think that was there were some good choices there, and like it was fun. It was a fun show, and like and a real soap opera-y kind of sleazy, bloody boobs kind of fun show, for sure. But I did sometimes feel a bit with some of the very heavy-handed gay to vampire social issue overlap was a bit.
Yeah, I get that. I've never read the books, but several years ago, like when the show first came out, my wife and I watched it then, really, really enjoyed it, and we kind of had a hankering, so we started it again. That was several weeks ago, and I think we just started into season 3, and we actually thought exactly what you're saying about the the sort of gay connection with the vampires. Really hadn't noticed it as much the first time through, but this time, yeah, it sort of did stand out more than we remembered.
Yeah, it's
but I
pretty
agree too. They
heavy-handed.
made a lot of good really good character choices. The acting is great. I mean, I think it does a lot more right than it does wrong.
For sure, for sure. And I mean, it's a show that I think overstayed, or again, when trying to separate itself from the books, I wish they had stayed a little closer to the books. I think they would
Yeah.
have avoided some of the problems, and specifically in that Naiad, or what is she? The kind of the one who gets everybody into kind of a sexual drunken fervor all the time.
Maynard.
Maynard, that's what it
I
is.
forget
And
her, forget her name
that
off.
was like the B plot in that book, and it was a very short. And there was a whole other like kind of murder mystery that was the main one, and that was the little one. And I kind of wish they had done that, because I feel like that's the season that really started to get a bit like this is
Yeah,
Well,
I completely agree on that.
to
but
get back to your book,
I'm a real veer offer.
no,
on
no,
this.
you fit in perfectly
You're in
with
the
this
club.
show.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But you're, I talked about the characters on True Blood. The characters in your book, even the minor ones, I thought were very, very well developed. And maybe this is a minor spoiler, but the detective that comes seeking Selene's help, he's also a vampire.
Yeah,
Um,
which I was afraid to do because it's so cliche, but I also love a vampire cop, which is such a thing in this
Yeah.
subgenre. So I was like, you know what, I'm doing it. I don't care.
I'm Angel. I need your help.
Yeah. Or I was even going back his apartment's a little bit Forever Night. I don't know if anyone
Yeah, I
remembers
remember- I
Forever
remember
Night.
Yeah,
that
I remember
show.
Forever Night.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was totally, it was like a little wink to Forever Night. His apartment.
Awesome. Yeah. So, what was the genesis of this book and the trilogy in general for you?
Well, it's funny. I was just at a book thing with Paul Tremblay, if you guys know. And
Who?
it was weirdly one
I
of
don't
the
know that guy.
I know, he's just like some guy. He's
Yeah.
trying to write. I don't know, he's doing his best.
Yeah.
But I remember this because he
He's
talked
doing his
about
best.
Cabin Cabin at the End of the World.
Right.
And I remember him talking about when that book came out, how he hated home invasion stories. And so he was trying to find a way to write about something he didn't like.
Yeah.
And so why I bring that up is it was similar. This is, always a little bit of a scandalous thing to say in these circles. Not a big zombie fan. I mean, I really, really like the
Oh,
original
no, that's
Night of the
not
Living
scandalous.
Dead.
I can't. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think they're overdone too. Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
I don't
Yeah.
get a lot from them, but I mean, I love the original Night of the Living Dead. Return of the Living Dead is one of my all-time favorite top 10 movies. I can watch it at any time, and it'll always make me feel better. It's a great time. I appreciate like 28 Days Later. Like, I mean, I appreciate the genre for what it is, but what I realized is I don't actually like survivor fiction very much, and that's what a zombie movie or book or whatever usually is, because it's like a ragtag team of survivors who are assembled trying to fight against this like apocalyptic end of the
Walking
world.
Dead
But
type thing. Yeah.
yeah, but like the undead could essentially be, a natural disaster of any other stripe. It kind of, and weirdly, I don't think there is enough time spent on the fact that they are the dead, and when you die, you'll just be part of that army, or I don't know, there's some weirdness there. But I wanted to try to find a way to write about zombies that like I hadn't seen before or felt different, and was doing something different with them. And again, that's a little spoilery, or like what you can actually do with them in the book is kind of a spoiler. But I liked the idea that they're both more ordinary and less fantastical in this society. They're just like a little bit weird. They're kind of depressed. Like they're just a little distant, and their sensory stuff is a little turned down because they've come back from the dead. But other than that, they're relatively ordinary, but the things you can make them do can be quite extraordinary. So
you just described a bunch of people I know.
I know, right? But yeah, so that was kind of the original genesis of the book, was like trying to find a way to center it around zombies that felt like something I hadn't read before, that felt like a very different statement on them and what it would be like, in a way that you as a reader could even think about, like, would you, if you had the opportunity, would you want to come back if you could?
Yeah.
into this world.
I think that's one of the things Laird means when in his blurb, when he talks about it raising some interesting questions, um, about life and death and so forth. And I like your point. And when Paul was on here talking about Cabin at the End of the World, he said that too, that he hates home invasion stories. And, so like you said, he thought I want to write one that I would actually enjoy, and same thing with you and zombies. So,
Yeah, it's
so
kind
that's
of a
interesting.
fun writing prompt. My
Yeah.
husband does that. Phil, who you came in earlier, Phil Gillette, who's a writer and a filmmaker, he often does that too. So it's an exercise that he and I do a lot of things, or taking something that's like a real trope or a stereotype and actually leaning into the stereotype and trying to
Yeah.
find something, some new direction to look at it, or to play with it, or to kind of play with the reader, where they're like, oh, I think I know what this is. I've seen it a million times, and then like immediately zig out of that expectation, which I love to read stuff like that. And I actually like to write stuff like that too, where you think you know what's going to happen, but then you're kind of,
Yeah.
You're doing something a little bit different.
You mentioned Phil. A lot of writers and creatives, their spouse is, does something else. With you and Philip, you're both writers and creative people. Um, do you guys bounce off ideas off of each other all the time? Is that a
Yeah, I
very
think
normal
when we
thing?
were younger and kind of more getting started,
Yeah.
it was a lot more of that. And his first script, which ended up being the movie The Bleeding House, we did a lot of work on to kind of together. And
Yeah.
so a lot of those earlier things, because I tend to be a very red pen kind of person. and he's a very subtle person. Like his writing and things are very
Did you
subtle,
red
and I'm
pen a
often
script?
always, oh yes, I've red
I
penned a lot
guess,
of things.
Victoria, I thought you loved me.
Yeah, no, but he's worse. He's worse because I'll give
Oh,
him
is he?
stuff to look at and he just rewrites it, and he'll give it back. And it's like, it's
Wow.
just, he's rewritten whole passages, and it's like, what is this? Like, I'll just cutting out huge swaths of it. Yeah, so he
The
does
whole
not even
thing's
like
been
marking it.
redacted,
He's like,
Phil.
I'll just do it, and he just rewrites it. It's like, oh, so no, but I think we're both pretty good at giving and receiving critique. And I went to art school, so that's always helpful, because in art,
Yeah.
you put it up immediately, and then everyone immediately tells you what they think about it. So you
Yeah.
get really comfortable with getting that kind of feedback of, this is not working, I like this, I don't, what's happening here. And I teach writing workshops for the Providence Public Library and some other nonprofit writing groups in Providence. And I teach a lot of critique workshops on just how to get comfortable getting and receiving
Well, that's
critique,
interesting.
and
Wow.
like constructive critique, and kind of removing the ego from it, and really kind of looking at it like, this is wet clay. You don't usually get people to see things in process like this and actually get their honest opinions. Use that as a resource. It's good to have that. And like, it might, and if it's something isn't working or they're not picking up on it, that doesn't mean it's trash and you just throw it away and quit. That just means you might need to rework a couple sentences or
Right.
make something a little more clear. Like, this doesn't have to be a judgment on your character in any way. It's like, they're on the same team. We all want this to be a good project, or
Yeah.
like a finished product, and really trying to remove, just that, that sensitive skin about it, because it's not easy to get, rough feedback, but also it can make it better. Like,
Yeah.
if you're like, this ending doesn't work,
Yeah.
you could go back and work on that ending. That's a good thing.
Right.
So I've got a question, because you mentioned something I thought was interesting. You're also a visual artist and you trained in art school. Does it now seem like you've more migrated to writing? Is this sort of like an evolution that happened, or are you still practicing visual artist? What's your
I do
medium?
both. Yep, I do both. And my other day job is as a gallery coordinator for an art organization called the Pawtucket Arts Collaborative. And so we put on shows a year. We have about 180 members, a lot of which, like, all skill levels, all age levels, and it's a really cool opportunity. So yeah, I mean, I still work and show work. I just had a show up in Portland, Maine, at a cool it's like a bar, bookstore, art gallery. And so I did the book release party there and then also had all of my art up for that show. And so I've done a few of those like kind of hybrid where I'm showing work and also selling books. And so I do a lot of
Nice.
that sort of thing as well. But yeah, no, I write out of my art studio. I always have canvases going and I kind of bounce back and forth. And I usually like write until my butt's asleep or I don't like what I'm doing and then get up and paint until like my back hurts or it's just mud and I don't know what I'm doing. And then I go sit back down and I usually bounce back and forth and kind of work on the problem I'm having with one while I'm working on the other. So I find it's helps my process to kind
Yeah.
of be doing them simultaneously. So yeah, I do. I would like to paint more, but hopefully I'll have a little more time.
Are you in Providence, Victoria?
Yep, I'm right on the east side in Providence, so I'm like a mile away from like Brown and everything, or
Oh,
about a
okay.
mile and a half.
My wife and I just spent a long weekend in Providence a couple of weeks ago. And,
Nice.
yeah, we had a good old time.
Yes, it's a good time of year. We had a nice fall. It was very.
Oh, it was gorgeous when we were there.
Jealous.
I'd been there at Necronomicon, but this is just real quick aside. There was going to be a Dark Shadows event in Newport, and that got canceled. So we had non-refundable tickets. So it's like, okay, we're going to Providence, and
Nice.
so we had a really great time, and I want to come back sometime. Just to wander about again.
Well,
Yeah, no,
you're
it's a
coming
fun
back
city.
in 2 years, buddy.
Yes,
For
I'll
sure.
be there. I'll be there.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, Necronomicon is a great time. I'm also in the art shows for Necronomicon. The last two, I've had work in those shows, and then the show previous to that, I edited their the book, the
Oh, yeah, the chapbook thing.
the chapbook.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just blanking on what it's called. I'm sure I have one
Absolutely.
kicking around from the year that I did it. But yeah, so I've been affiliated with it, and then my husband usually does the film portions and helps run the film portions of the convention. So it's a great convention. Yeah, and this year I was on a few panels actually and did a reading. I was really all over the place this past year, but yeah.
Yeah, this past year was my first Necronomicon, and I very much loved it.
It's a great convention, and I obviously am biased because I kind of help with it and everything, but I think it's a great one, and it has a lot for a lot of different people. We had a friend come one year, and he was surprised by how kind of academic it was, and he was like, wow, this is not like a Comic-Con. These are really intense people. I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's still some of these lectures are, like school lecture, which is good. I mean, that's
they
what
are,
we want.
but there's also a lot of fun there, so you can kind of
Right,
pick
and
and
then
choose.
so there's like the gaming component. There's also kind of more pop culture components. There's a movie component. There's an art show component, and then there's the more academic. And then there's degrees within that as well. So yeah, I just think it's a really fun. Has a little something for everyone, kind of within the genre for sure. And so yeah, and I've written a lot of mythos type fiction, and I've always been a big Lovecraft fan, and yeah, I've been in like 6 or 7 Lovecraft-esque anthologies and stuff. So like I'm definitely a fan of the weird subgenre of horror, big time.
Question. Well, first a comment. I want to clarify. This is about you, and the only reason I brought up Philip basically is because you did, and because I genuinely had that question about you have two very creative people in a relationship, and how you guys bounced. I was curious about that. As far as the Lovecraftian or cosmic horror stories that you've written, if someone wants to go out there and look for your short fiction, which anthologies should they look at? And I'm surprising you with this question. So,
well, I was in found one called Wicked Weird, which was put out by the New England Horror Association, NEHW. And they put out annual. It's a writers group. It's kind of like it's a New England based, similar to the HWA, but a smaller New England based one. And I've been in a few of their collections, and I was also in one called Wicked Women, which is a lot of fun. That's just all women authors from that group. But the Wicked Weird one is their tribute to kind of Lovecraft and weird fiction, and mine is the title story in that. I was in a book called Pickman's Heirs.
Oh
No,
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
something else. No, Pickman's Gallery. And had a story that's actually the first story in my, I used that one as my first story in my short story collection.
I was about to ask you because you emailed me, like I said, a couple months ago about Celine Shade, and sent me the book. But there's so many writers out there. It's easy for one to fly under your radar, So I'm glad you did email me, very very much so, and wasn't aware of your collection. So can you talk about that for a second?
Sure. So that one came out with Clash in 2022, I believe. Let me see if I have a copy up here. I might not.
And while you're doing that, just for those who are interested in Philip,
Nope, sadly I don't. I thought I did. My apologies. I was ill
oh,
prepared
that's
for
okay.
the video component of
No,
it.
that's
But
fine.
I believe it's 16 stories in that one. Only one of them was unpublished. One, maybe two within that collection were unpublished. And it was kind of my tribute to women in, and also just horror subgenres, because I like to write in a lot of different ones. So there's some weird westerns in there, there's some contemporary stuff, there's kind of more Victorian Gothic stuff. Actually, the Victorian Gothic story in that is also probably the weirdest, kind of Lovecraft weirdest one. About some romance with moss. But
Yeah, okay.
and
Oh, come
yeah,
on.
so
Everyone uses that trope, Victoria.
yeah, I know, right? Like erotic moss situations happen to everybody. It's just what happens. But
I
yeah,
thought
so
it was just
it's
me.
a
Wow.
lot of I also love folklore monsters. So there's a story that's kind of loosely based sort of on a Rusalka and also like a Japanese water spirit kind of merged thing. And then there's another one about a monster, its name escapes me right now, that's an East Asian monster that is a lady that flies around and has this huge hole in her neck, and she flies on her hair, causes lots of trouble. But and I remembered the note with this monster is you could catch her and stuff all the hair in the hole in her neck, you could marry her. And I remembered, I was like a kid reading this like folk tales book at the time, and I was like, but why would you what? Like it's just like this screeching monster, and you're like, and then you got yourself a wife. So one of the stories is about one of those in that book, called The Wife. And yeah, so there's
Oh, and you were in the anthology Why Didn't You Just Leave, which
yep.
is they were on my show, I don't know, a year ago when it first came out or was about to come out, and it's a really interesting premise. And
Yeah, it's a great it is a great collection, and I was really impressed with a lot of the stories in there, and also super pleased because there was some really tight competition. There was some really really cool ideas.
yeah,
And yeah, so the concept with that one is haunted houses, but that universal question in haunted houses is, why didn't you just leave? Like, just get out of there. And so it's creating scenarios where for one reason or another people can't leave. And so in my story, I can't think of the name of it'll come to me, but my story in that, it is a character who is a severe agoraphobic and has
that would do it.
had yep, and she had some sexual trauma and things like that happened outside, and now so even though she's facing eviction and she is like kind of in an extreme hoarding situation and she hates it there and it's a terrible basement apartment, she also cannot leave. And then this mold spot keeps growing, and then something comes out of it. And even then she can't leave. So and I was really
Pickman's
flattered.
Gallery, you said, I forgot, Matt, you edited that one.
Yes, I did.
For Ulthar Press way back
Yeah,
when.
that was ages ago.
Yeah, so that was, but I loved the story I had in that was the creek slant of light, a creek in the floor, and it was based on a warehouse here in Oneyville, which is a neighborhood in Providence, like an industrial neighborhood that's filled with kind of artists and old industrial buildings. And there's one big building there called Atlantic Mills that I've always been very taken with, and had a bunch of friends that lived in different spaces. And I always thought it'd be a great place to set a scary story because the basement's terrifying. The building is enormous. And there's all sorts of weird stories, and people are really transient. And I liked the idea of ghouls that live in the basement and eat artists, and no one notices because all the artists are transient and no one knew their names or their last names, and everyone's kind of coming and going, so they could be there for a while picking people off without anyone noticing.
I'll just
So
apologize that when you sent me all the corrections and I went over them with Sam and we got our final draft ready to publish, he sent them a file that was like 2 generations earlier. So every single typo we ferreted out was published. So
Oh, yeah.
well, it was re-released in something else. It got a spit shine and was redone, so don't worry.
I'm sorry, what was the name of your collection again?
La Femme Grotesque.
Okay. And John, do you have any comments or questions for Victoria?
Got a lot to say to Victoria.
I know, you're surprisingly quiet. This is the quietest I've ever heard you.
I was just waiting for my moment.
I paid
okay.
him not to talk, but apparently
Waiting for
I
someone
didn't
to
pay him
take a
enough.
breath.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, when is Davis going to let anyone get a word in? You guys have anything else to say? Oh, no, let me just keep going for 5 or 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah.
That's the first time
It's,
I've ever been accused of talking too much, but I'll take it.
Okay. All right. I only you could turn my damning criticism into a vote of confidence.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Son of a.
That reminds me in a Dr. Who episode where
let me tell you another.
the president. No. This is funny though. The president says to this guy, "I hear you have a real problem with authority," and the guy says back to him, "Thank you." And he goes, "It's not a compliment, son." Anyway, John, it is your moment. Sorry.
No, not anymore. It's the moment's past.
All right.
Vicky, if
Yeah.
Of course, I came in 15 minutes late, so maybe all of this has already been addressed.
I'm used to it.
No, we were mostly just talking bad about you before you got here.
Well, that's as well you should, Oh, hey, speaking of your husband, I have to show you this. Not that we were really speaking about that guy because he's terrible.
You know what's funny is we're so rarely seen in the same place or talk about each other. Oh yeah. I also had to read a lot of rough drafts of that book.
What is that?
And look, so this is a book called Petrograd, which is a graphic novel about the assassination of Rasputin, written by your friend and mine, Phil Gillette, who has this obsession with the Soviet Union.
Yeah, he loves Russian history. And it's actually so well researched, that graphic novel, that it's been taught in schools and in high schools, because the odds are very good that his, obviously zhuzhed it up for it to be, it's a fiction graphic novel, but most likely what happened in that book is actually what happened to Rasputin, and kind of who killed him and how that
am
went.
I wrong? I feel like it was a time that Laird and I were visiting you guys, and Phil got into this huge thing about how he wanted to write a graphic novel about Stalin when Stalin was a bank robber. Okay.
Yeah, that's a thing. I'm sure.
Okay. All right. I'm just wondering, because I was talking to somebody about this, and they were like, "What? Stalin was a bank robber?" And I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure Phil Gillette told me that he." So I'm sorry, but okay.
Yeah, no, I think his early Stalin was an idea too, because he also had an interesting and strange background. Yeah. So I mean, he's very attracted to moments in history that are not very well known, or
look, I'm worried about the Rasputin, Stalin. I think you got to get out of this house, man. I think you're in danger. I'm saying,
the reality is he's in danger from me.
That's Your Honor, there's your confession.
No, but it is funny. We do such different things creatively, and often people won't realize, and we don't have the same last name. People won't even realize we're married, or like then we're standing next to each other, and people are like, "Oh, do you guys know each other?" It's like, no, I've never met that guy.
It came back in the background check that I do for everyone on the show. So.
Yes.
But I'm wondering though, okay, this is going to sound patronizing, and I don't mean to sound patronizing, right? But I feel like you're part of this group that I perceive of newer writers, mostly younger writers, but still newer
I don't find it
writers.
patronizing that you find me younger. I would be a little more concerned if we were like, we went to high school together,
So
right?
you guys have been around forever.
Yeah.
Weren't you my high school home ec teacher? How have you stayed so young? But
moisturizing, baby. You stay out of the sun, you moisturize.
but like, I'm just kind of wondering, like a sort of an open-ended question in some ways. I have said a few times that I was at a thing at the Westport Library Festival a couple of years ago, and I got up on like I was doing something. It was something that Ellen Datlow had kind of shanghaied me into. Poor me, right? And I'm up on stage with like Paul and Stephen and Grady and I don't know, Bracken McLeod maybe. And like I looked out at, there are people like Rachel Harrison and Clay Chapman and out in the audience. And I had this thought where I was like, we are no longer the new guys. We're not the old guys, Stephen King's still around, but at the same time, we're just like the guys, and so we found each other just because we liked each other's writing. We got to be friends with each other, that sort of thing. So I wonder, like, do you like when we were at that thing the other week, the Hudson, whatever it was, the haunted weekend thing, like we were sitting at a table and we're talking to Krista Carmen and so on. And so like Robert Otone. So are there people that you see like in that way, sort of like writing friends, but also you've got something in common beyond that? If that, your writing has something in common beyond that, do you perceive?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Krista Carmen, as we had driven down and we met at the first NeCon that both of us were at, and NeCon is I'm trying to think how to classify it. It's like our horror writers camp retreat.
It's a weekend of drinking is basically what it is. Yeah.
Though Chris is sober, so I found like the one person who's like, no thanks. Like, okay, well, I'll just drink for both of us then. Yeah, so I remember I met her because I didn't know what to do. I was just kind of wandering around and everybody knows each other and there's oodles of in-jokes and people are wearing Shriners caps and handshakes are happening. And I was like, I don't know. And I was just wandering around and she was just standing there and also was like, again, like a lady with pigment in her hair and was confused. And so we kind of walked up and started talking. And this was, oh gosh, I don't know now, like 10 years ago, maybe more.
Oh wow, I didn't realize you guys knew each other that long.
Yeah, and then we, over the years, we kept being in collections together or being at things, and then she's now like edited 2 collections that I've had stories in with her and stuff, and so yeah, we've kind of worked together, and I feel like same with like Gwendolyn Kist, who I really just liked her work, and then kind of started talking to her at an event, and then she wrote a nice introduction to my first book, which hopefully will come out again eventually. But she wrote a really nice introduction for that whenever that does happen. And yeah.
And this is Parasite Life, just for the audience. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully someday it'll find a home, or I'll just I don't know, I guess put it out myself, but I'm not looking forward to doing that. So if anyone wants to, let me know. Yeah. So I feel like, within that group, there's a lot of them. I like talking to other writers. I like reading their work and then talking to them about their work in general. So I don't know. I enjoy the community aspects of that. But I would actually consider you guys part of that. I wouldn't put you as like the old guard yet as well. I feel like you're usually
I like you. Just wait 5 years, Langan.
Really, because I would have to respectfully disagree on that, Victoria, but that's okay.
Yeah. That he's old, or that he's
I agree that he's
young
old
for my age. I'm very young for my age,
You would never guess that Mark is 35. Yeah.
No, he's exactly what happens when you don't moisturize.
Do you see my beard and my hair, how white it's gotten? That's just since I've known John Langan. That's what happened.
Yeah, he was like Sable, He was like a bear, like a man bear.
Yeah, but I like to think you're sucking all that life force out and it's just coming out in your long ponytail.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just
for all the power. But then we just have to cut it and then you can get their power back.
Yeah, I mean, I know that like these kinds of things are always kind of inexact, and they're never as well organized as speaking is like a sort of recovering literary critic as
Mhm.
literary critics would like them to be, you know. But I'm just always fascinated like um how you guys see each other and what, say, inspiration you draw from what, you know, from what you're doing. I mean, I could make certain observations as an outsider about things that I see you guys doing, um but I don't know, I guess I'm just curious to sort of kick that to you and ask you what you think.
Well, I think that there's enough, I think, like especially with the weird fiction genre now, there's been like a few generations of it, like, you know, that where like even the idea of like new weird almost feels passe, because you're like, well, what's like, is that from the 90s, 2000, like, you know,
I
they've been
think that was
doing,
mostly, wasn't that mostly like a marketing technique,
yeah, just kind of
you
keeps
know,
being
like, yeah,
rebranded.
yeah,
And like some of it is trying to get the stigma and like the Lovecraft stink off of it, you know, to
right, right.
like to kind of get away from his name, and also to kind of get bigger and like kind of open up the kind of a inclusivity umbrella of like who can be writing that and who would feel comfortable writing that or feeling welcome within those circles. And so I think that a lot of the people that kind of came up around that time, and myself included, I think we're all just doing things a little bit different within what's been there. But I think it's been I don't know, I feel like it's fun. Like it's a fun space. Like I don't know, I'm always excited when people have successes or doing well, or their stuff is getting read, and or their stuff is going kind of mainstream, even though it's decidedly not mainstream. I would say Eric LaRocca is a great example,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's just wild that his stuff is doing so well. But I also was, you know, a voracious reader young and came to the splatterpunk fiction and everything when I was a teenager, and that's what I was reading. Like, I mean, I like Poppy Z. Brite was my favorite author when I was like 15, and Nancy A. Collins and Kathy Koja and like Charlie Jacobs. Remember her?
Mhm. Yeah.
Symbiotic
So
Fascination.
was that
I
like the Abyss line of books,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I just ate those. And so that was my formative, like you know, I went from like the Stephen King to the Anne Rice train straight into like pretty hardcore and like really subversive horror was like kind of really where I was for a long time and what I came up reading. And so I'm excited to see authors like that coming back, and because they were in the mainstream, they were
Yeah.
not, you know, you could pick up those books at a supermarket, you know, like just like at the with gum, you
Yeah.
know, and so
Gum and Kathy
yeah,
Koja.
right,
Did
or like
you
Exquisite Corpse. It's like
so did you, I'm curious because like, you know, Kathy, a couple of her books, right, they're sort of artist figures.
mhm.
And obviously that was something Clive Barker himself is like an artist figure, right? Was that something that spoke to you like more, I don't know, directly or acutely
I think
than,
so, that there's other ways to convey this information. Like you can be kind of, there's words, but there's also other ways, visual languages. And so you're kind of working from both. Or I think the challenge, you know, I also obviously love Clive Barker and, you know, grew up on Clive Barker too, and have all of his art books. I have a devil tattoo of his, drawing of his on my butt. So, you know, in case my body gets found without a head, ask about the
I
butt.
there you
Is there
go,
a devil?
Davis. There's the scoop you were asking for.
Yes,
There
is there a
it
devil
is.
on my butt?
Exactly
Was it a
right.
Clive
That's why
Barker?
people watch this show, right? That kind of information.
Yeah, and now you just have to think about that all the time and what it looks like and what it is. But
I'll
yeah,
be
so
showing you
I've
different
always liked
pictures
that.
of Clive Barker devils. I'm like, is it this one? Is it this one?
You'll just have to wait till my body washes up on shore without a head.
Oh,
No
thank
head.
God.
But yeah, so I always love the idea of like the tortured artist, or just the artist as writer as well, or just like, I think there's a lot of writers that are also something else, like they're also a musician, or they're also like, what are you, John, like a ninja or something, right?
No, like a
Like
torso killer, but we won't talk about that right now.
torso, sorry. But yeah, like I think most people are more than one thing, and
Right.
I think in creative capacities most of us have different ways to do things, and you know, there's different muscles for different things, and I think the more you can kind of merge those, yeah. And then my first book, Parasite Life, which was kind of a tribute to like the Victorian classics, and like with a heavy kind of Dorian Gray and things, one of the characters is a painter, and I was trying to figure out how to talk about paintings and like write about art process and without it being like super boring. So,
Right,
you know,
right.
but that
But
idea.
there's a vampire or vampiric thing in that first novel
Oh
too.
yeah. I mean,
And then you were mentioning in Selene Shade, there's also like what is the vampire do for you?
well, they're my favorites. With
Okay.
werewolf shapeshifters as a strong second, as we've gone over, zombies way down. But I love vampires because um they're one of those monsters that have been with human kind since the beginning of it in some form or another. We have this idea about death, we have this idea about blood, we have this idea about people like sucking the life out of each other, and these things like translate all over the world. And I kind of love monsters that exist everywhere, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they really exist, but it does mean something about the human condition, that we look at these problems and something in us comes to this answer, and it doesn't
Right.
matter if this person's like living in the middle of nowhere over here or on this island over here, that they would kind of come to this idea. And I find that really fascinating, that most cultures have like an animal shapeshifter element, most of them have an undead thing, and
Right.
like this idea about certain types of magic. And so that's something I love. And the thing about vampires is that they tend to shift and change with the cultures that they exist in. So they serve different purposes. They're a really versatile monster. And I think, you know, much like the actual kind of figures, like with like being immortal in some of the versions, they're changing all the time to base. So like if you look at the 80s, like Lost Boy monster, it's the like sleep all day, party all night, never get old, it's fun to be a vampire is the slogan. So you're kind of like getting the appeal of, you know, just being a partying teen forever, and like that idea about vanity and never aging and never having to follow any rules is like was very attractive. Or if you think about like The Hunger and this idea of trying to keep a partner with you forever, and like love is, there's a component, but there's also something very parasitic about those relationships. And that like this idea of vampire love stories, it's like, well, they're going to kill you, you know, or they're going to make you like their bride, and then they're going to have to go off with somebody else. So they're naturally kind of, you're in an open relationship like a vampire society now. So
Well, there's something in
yeah.
the Hunger, isn't there, about on the one hand, you want to think that the old lovers that she sort of kept in this half-life, that seems like a trope for memory of things past, the way that our ghosts haunt us, but at the same time she's keeping them alive, right, or unalive,
Yeah, just not
the
dead, but not alive.
yeah,
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 just
yeah,
like in that stasis. But that idea, yeah, that her selfishness, like her love of them, she can't let them go and will
right,
just leave them to suffer. And there's something like extremely horrific about that. Or again, like the stress of her regard. Is that the Tim Powers
Tim
book?
Powers, yeah.
I love that book. I don't think that one gets enough love just in general. And I
Yeah.
just think it's fantastic and like exhaustively researched. And if you like kind of the Victorian Gothics and kind of the origin of a lot of vampire fiction and the kind of the John Polidori, Byron, all that kind of stuff, that book is so good. But
He
yeah,
has he has a new one about the Brontes, but I haven't read it yet. But it looks like it's the same style, exhaustively researched, and here's all the weird stuff that was going on. I
but
think
also
with
weirdly
Branwell.
fun. It was fun and readable. I haven't really read his other books. That guy that lives with me, he loves Tim Powers and has read all his
That
other
guy that
books and
lives with me.
hasn't read that one. So like weirdly, I have read that one and liked it, hadn't read the others, and vice versa. So but yeah, so I mean, I could talk about that shit forever. But yeah, I think I like vampires for their kind of subversiveness, for the elements of sexuality within them, for the kind of messy consent components to them, for the idea that they're very beautiful, but also kind of disgusting, or depending on the vampire version, they're also just disgusting. Like I'm reading that the new book of Vampires in El Norte.
Isabella Cañas, right?
Yeah, I'm reading that right now, and her vampires are really gross. I mean, they don't even have eyes; they're like dried out little sockets and just all teeth, and they're pretty gross. So,
what's your favorite vampire movie?
I was going to say top 5. How about top 5?
Yeah,
There you
it's tough. It's always a toughie. I mean, I love Near Dark.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, it's a problematic movie, but I also not problematic in a it has its problems narratively and stuff. But I mean, Bill Paxton as Severin is just amazing.
Lance Henriksen.
I love the strangeness. It has a great ending that's not a happy ending. Like when they cure the main girl's vampirism, it's left on a down note. There's a really sad, somber note, and it's a freeze frame on her face. And the others had been, just kind of running around grody monsters, but she had a bigger idea, the whole I'm gonna be here when the sky burns out and I'm gonna watch all these stars die. And she had a much bigger kind of elemental take on vampirism, and that was kind of robbed. And I read some really interesting feminist interpretations of that movie, and how so much of it is about all these men kind of taking her magic and kind of power away. And I just think it's an interesting read.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but
movie.
I had that same reaction when I saw the movie and on rewatches also. That earlier in the movie she says to I forget the guy's name, but that you see that star, when that light from that star reaches Earth, I will still be here, and turns out not to be the case.
Yeah, and she has to go live with him and his dad now, on some farm.
Yeah.
It's just
Get to
Your
work.
dad.
Get to
yeah,
work.
the magic was taken, and that dad, I believe, was in all the Trancers movies, on Full Moon. And interestingly, she was in Lawnmower Man as the kind of slutty neighbor, which is just
Really?
I hadn't noticed until the last time I watched Lawnmower Man.
She was like, things got even worse after I became a human.
Nothing is working out for her. But
God.
yeah, so I love Near Dark. I will always love Lost Boys. I used to watch it constantly as a kid.
Yeah.
I'm very partial to Fright Night. I love Chris Sarandon's Jerry Dandridge. I did not like the remake, but I did really like Colin Farrell's construction worker Jerry Dandridge, which I thought was actually great, but I didn't love anything about the rest of that movie, but I thought he was actually quite good in Fright Night. I mean, I just love vampire movies. I mean, I've seen them all. I like them all. It's
Only
so
Lovers
hard.
Left Alive?
I did really like that. It's funny. I saw that one at CGIS, which is the Spanish Film Festival, when Europa Report, my husband's movie Europa Report, was in that same festival. And I really liked it. And everyone around me was dead asleep, audibly snoring. And it was in the middle of the afternoon.
Oh,
and I was really enjoying it. And I kind of noticed the guy next to me sleeping. Then I noticed the other guy. And then I noticed everyone in front. I was like, seriously, is there a gas leak in here? Why? And they were all going, but I really liked it.
I've seen it 5 times. I just love that movie.
I rewatched it again, actually pretty recently. And the thing I love about that is its statement about long relationships and the kind of love that endures, which is just not something you see much ever discussed in movie. It's just not, it's the happily ever after and then what, the many chapters later of people just reading the newspaper and farting and stuff. That's the other years of your life. And the idea of couples that have then been together for so long, and that they live apart but then come back together, but that there's such a deep affection there, and that they have things that that make them want to be with each other forever. I thought there was something really good and really human about that story, and just what very ancient people do to fill their days and their and their
I have a problem
relationships.
with stories about immortals, whether they're vampires or they're immortal because of whatever reason, and the immortal acts like a teenager or is very immature. You know,
I
if
mean,
you're
the Twilights would be a great example of that. It's
yeah,
like you just keep doing high school again. It's weird.
yeah,
Like,
it's really weird. The other thing I like so much about that movie, but the other thing, well, they act like immortals would act, you know. And the other thing about that movie is when uh, the couple is driving through Detroit and all those burnt out neighborhoods and everything, and he sees humanity as a part. You know, he's not part of humanity anymore. Talks about how they keep doing things to ruin their planet, you know, and they keep making the same mistakes over and over. And if you're immortal, you would see humans doing that. Just they keep making the same mistakes.
yep, that cyclical nature. I think there's also something, it makes me wonder because part of the way that you change is in the act of aging, and your body changing and your life changing. And if you didn't change,
Yeah,
would you get older, or like if you look 15 or 18, like would you kind of developmentally in some ways stay that age because no one would treat you differently and you aren't hitting any of those life checkpoints? So there, I also do kind of wonder about how someone who is very, very old but doesn't necessarily look very old, like that would, I would assume, start to distort your perception.
there's a
Or
really
like
good book.
in Near Dark, you know, you've got the kid in
Mhm.
Near
And he
Dark
was one of the
who gets
oldest
no
ones.
respect. Yeah, yeah, he
Right.
gets no respect.
There's a really great vampire book by Christopher Buehlman. I don't know if you read it, called The Lesser Dead. And the protagonist in that book is like 86 or 8, you know, he's like near 90 if I remember. But he looks 14. And what Chris did in that book was if you become a vampire when you're at that age, you don't develop emotionally or mentally. You live forever, but you sort of stay a 14-year-old, which is
Well,
really
that's what
interesting.
Anne Rice did with Interview with the Vampire too, and
Mm,
I always found that one to be especially heartbreaking because the reason she kind of did that is her daughter died in real life, and so then her daughter's kind of modeled after the Claudia character, and then this idea of getting, you know, to keep this 5-6-year-old child, but then they have like a child's wants and needs that have now been kind of distorted by kind of like a monstrous destructive appetite and
yeah,
feeling kind of invulnerable. So this idea, and then like as they grow up in this little body, then are getting angrier and angrier because they'll never grow up, and they're treated, you know, especially Claudia, who's like 5 or 6 in the books. And that, I always thought that must have been a really interesting process for her as far as grief goes, because that is always the thing about losing a child, especially if you lose a child young, or even if you've known someone who died young, they stay young and forever. So even when you're like
that's
80,
a good point.
they're
Right,
16 in your memory of them. And if you were going to talk to them or summon them, they would be 16 years old. They wouldn't look like they were 80. And so in the process, I think of, I mean, I don't know if this was true for her, but I feel like it probably was, in this process of grieving for her daughter, the fact that she made the daughter so miserable staying in this child body and then eventually like dying, but there's almost something merciful in killing her because it was only going to
That's
end
true.
badly for her, like was probably purging some of that, like that daughter was going to be 5 forever in her mind, and like the grief of that. But
there's
yes,
Grady Hendrix did I can't remember what the name of his occasional podcast, and it's called something like Super Scary Homeschool. And he does these sort of deep dives on various topics, and one of them is Anne Rice, and I thoroughly recommend that. It doesn't really talk. It's a heavily biographical reading of Rice's stuff, so it doesn't really go much beyond her biography, but her biography is really fascinating and really, yeah, really tragic in a lot of ways, because at the time that she writes Interview, she's also drinking herself to death. And that remains, and that, you know, the need to drink obviously is very much part of the whole vampire series, you know. And and he talks about Claudia and the relationship to the daughter, but also her own issues, I guess. And it's really compelling, and there was just a lot I didn't know. I mean, which is maybe not saying much.
well,
I mean, I
it's
feel
just
like we
one
could
of the
talk about.
first. Oh, I mean, love. I mean, and I, again, like, oh, a goth girl who came up in the 80s and 90s. Like, obviously, I was a huge fan.
Right.
So there's no mystery there. But I love her. And she was actually one of the first authors that in an interview I read with her ages ago, where she talked about how basically all of the characters were essentially her, and like especially Lestat. And I always kind of liked that idea where she's like, yeah, I mean, they're all me, they're all aspects of me, or like I'm like pulling from myself, and like, kind of id desires in one character, or the kind of the, like Louis, like the the guilty Catholic, sad, kind of tragic character, like all these characters. I think she was bringing a lot of herself and like doing the work, and that her immortals are miserable because it's their own choices that or things that have happened to them that make them miserable. They don't have like a big bad guy that's coming after them. Like they are their own bad guys. And that also tracks with like a grieving mother with an alcohol problem, like.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating, isn't it, that in an interview especially, like none of them really know anything.
No.
Like they don't have access to the lore. They're just like, I'm a vampire now. I can do this, I can do that, but I don't really know why.
Well,
And
that's why the
part of-
best when Lestat comes to the theater and they're all like just in the dark in their little black capes and their thing, and he's like, no, you guys could, get jobs and like wear pants and stuff. They're just
Right,
like, what?
right.
It's like this idea of like, we just thought we had to stay in this crypt. And they're like, no, you can do stuff. But but I think that's why vampires are so fun, because they are also much more human in that way. And I am someone who believes that writing about monsters, you can get more honest about humanity sometimes
Yeah.
than just like a straight drama in a way.
Victoria,
can I
I
ask
really
you-
do think that you would like, just as real quick, you would really enjoy The Lesser Dead by Christopher Buehlman. There's a lot of different
I
vampire
think
characters in that, and they're all different.
you know what, the Let the Right One In also has that
Oh,
really
yes.
interesting child character. And that book, I loved that book, but it also bothered me. It was one of the rare books that like he's an author that was it Lindquist?
Yeah, Lindquist.
John Lindquist. Yeah, like I have a couple of his books. There's like a dead kid book of his that I have that I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to read that one. That one just seems too heavy. I can't remember the name. Maybe
I
Ocean.
really
in the
enjoyed
title?
Let Me In, the American version. I mean, I enjoyed both, but and the kid says to her, "How old are you?" And she says, 12, but I've been 12 for a very long time.
And that idea of when you're that young, you need to have like a Renfield type, and then
Yeah.
she just like enlists like endless pedophiles. It's just there's some really grim stuff in that. But again, like that idea of if you are a forever child, you will need a caretaker companion because you won't be able to move through space like in any way. It's not like you can walk in like a suit and be like, yes, I'm here to open my bank account. Like you just will look like a kid. So the idea of an undead child is genuinely horrific, I think. Just
So what was what this makes me want to ask, right, is like we're talking about all the things you read, that I guess we were all looking at when we were kids, right?
Mhm.
Like, so what's the moment where you were like, hey, like I can do this, or I want to do this?
I always wrote, and I did a lot of kind of comic-y stuff too, where I like would be writing and drawing at the same time, and when I was younger. And yeah, I always wrote. I definitely didn't show it to a lot of people. I had like a friend growing up that loved to read my writing, and she always reads anything I write now to this day. She usually reads the rough drafts of it because she used to like me to like read her stuff like before bed. And so it was New Hampshire. We were very bored. We had nothing to do.
It was very cold.
Yeah, and we lost power a lot. It was a lot of real old time. People are like, how old are you? It's like, well, by candlelight, I regaled them with scary stories. It was 6:30 p.m., but absolute darkness. So it was pretty grim times. But I like to write stories always. And it was only after I had been working in art museums for a while and thought I was like living the dream and kind of got what I wanted. And I'm like, I'm at the MoMA. I have an office. This is amazing. And I was it was fine, but it was just a really bureaucratic job. And I it was only going to get more bureaucratic and it wasn't very creative. And it made me, I don't know, start to want to write more. And I had been writing. And then when I left the museum and wasn't sure what I wanted to do, I took a year off and I was like, I'm going to see if I can write a book and like actually put my money where my mouth is. Like, can I write? Everyone says they want to. We all know a billion people who have that amazing novel they want to tell you about that lives right here. You know, like that idea
Right.
that can you actually sit down and write it and complete it and do something with it. And so yeah, so I did that, and that book eventually was Parasite Life, that I had sat down and did that with. And then I just started, writing, I guess. But and liked it. I mean, it's such like an unforgiving industry that I was like, this is stupid. I should go back to a regular job. But
Right.
there's also, it's fun. It's fun to tell yourself stories and to come up with concepts, and I don't know. And I'm always really excited when anyone reads it and responds to it. It's always so cool. I just think it's the neatest thing because it's such a conversation. And a lot of times you're like, I don't know, you probably feel this way too, John, and anyone else who's a writer, you're like, is this any good, or is this really bad, or does anyone like, all right, well, I guess we'll just hand it out and we'll see if anyone like
I feel
picks
like
up
there's
what I'm putting down.
I mean, I feel like this Mark has written a lot of stuff too. And I feel like, there's a moment I certainly feel when I get disgusted with what I'm writing. And I'm like, don't you go through this all the time. Just relax. This is
I
part of
hate
the
everything
process.
I've ever written. I mean, every time I write something, I don't ever want to see it again. I'm ready to move on.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people who've read my work feel the same way. So,
yeah, I was going to say same.
From the reviews, that seems to be the
In
normal.
fact, there's a couple of things I've written that, after somebody I knew read it, they never talked to me again. It's a wonder my wife talks to me after she read The Monarchs,
I was going to say, like, you were like, okay, Mom, come on.
One of my good friends, when we were in college, and again, I so rarely showed anyone anything I was writing at that time, and I had a short story, and I was like, hey, would you be willing to read something I wrote? And she did, and we were supposed to go to Salem to the Peabody Essex Museum there for like an art thing. And so I was like, yeah, read it, and then maybe we can talk about it in the car ride or whatever. And she like thought it was so scary and gross that she was afraid of me. And she
Wow.
was like,
Excellent.
I almost canceled this trip because I was so weirded out by like what you gave me. And I was so creeped out, and I was like, kind of afraid to be in a car with you. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. That is amazing. And we talked about the car. She's like, wait, that's good. You want? I'm like, yeah, that's amazing that you were so upset. So I took it as high praise, but I think that's
So
just
what
kind of.
let me ask you, 5 books that your desert island books. It can be more than 5, but like, the books where that you feel are in some way foundational for you. And maybe that's
so
different from the
tricky.
desert island books, like, I mean, you might take to the desert island things that, something
Well,
might have had
because
a
I
big
think they're different. Yeah, Desert Island.
yeah,
I think these naturally have a bit of a trap. I often want to asking people these where it's more like the thing you think is like so important, but also I feel like the Desert Island ones would be more the popcorn. It's like something you could watch every single day, or like
right,
you
because
only
you're
have
on the
one
desert
book to
island.
read
Yeah.
forever. I don't know the
Right.
person who's gonna pick some giant tome, or they're like Gravity's Rainbow or something. It's like right, or someone who's like some book that they've always been meaning to read. They're like, oh, I'll finally bring that TV.
Right. Infinite
You're a
Jest. Here we
sicko.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's hard because I think whenever I think of the Desert Island ones, I think more about like comfort books or books that I can read a million times over. And for me, a lot of times with those, they often were like a moment in time that I read it, and then I think about that time, and then there's a
Right.
fondness.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if that is something that happens. Like I really like the book by Robin McKinley called Sunshine, which is a vampire book.
Yeah.
And again, it's just like a really weird book about a baker that gets kidnapped by this vampire dude. But it's something, and also it makes me want to eat. Like there's a lot of baking in it. It's very food.
Well, that's.
But I really, really like that book. And I remember reading it, I don't know, maybe in high school the first time. And I've read it, I don't know, easily like 10 times. And I just I just really like it, but I always want there to be more to that book. And I think
Mhm.
that'll be the funny part about it. Like I always read it and wish there was like a little bit more of something. It leaves me like feeling a little frustrated. So
Like an extra donut.
so yeah, you just need
Hey,
or cookie. She
yeah.
makes maybe it's scones that she makes. So there's like a recipe in it that she's always working on. But yeah, it's so hard to tell. Like I loved like Nancy A. Kahn's Sunglasses After Dark, the Sonia Blue books. I
Mhm.
really like, and those were one of my ultimate favorite books growing up, and I still really like those. Also the Tanya Huff Blood series, which are just straight like kind of crime fiction, and I really liked those. I like those for the characters are unexpected. Like she's like again a very kind of dominant, tall, bigger character, and then the love interest is like a small little romance novel guy, and then this beefy cop, but she's going blind, and so she's forced off the police force, and so she's a detective, but she's like trying to lie about hide how blind she is, and like
Right.
she's really not able to do her job, and so she's kind of like a complicated character because she's just facing loss, and she's I don't know, I really like that character, and she was kind of had very contemporary views on like sex and relationships and things, and in the time they were written, which I believe is like the mid to late 80s, and she just felt weirdly contemporary, and I don't know, I always loved those books, and they're kind of like creature feature crime fiction books, but they're I don't know,
Right.
really well done. Yeah, I don't know. I always have like a blank of every book I've ever written whenever anyone or read whenever anyone asks this. Like weirdly, like I always loved Firestarter, which is like Stephen King's like no one's favorite but mine. But I love psionic and psychics and
Right.
stuff. And I love the father-daughter relationship in that. I think it's a really like tender, and also just the idea of a child that is dangerous and that you care about, but also like your life would be easier if they weren't there. And I think
Right.
that's like one of the more hard to say out loud things about like parent child stuff, and I just think like her powers are so cool in that, and then when she really like unloads at the end, it just blows everything up, and there's a scene when the chimney just shoots and a limousine melts in half and like folds in on
Yeah.
itself and stuff, and I don't know. I feel like that book is so visually evocative, and like the other scene where all the chickens explode as like the temperature is going up and they're like
Yeah.
popping, and I don't know, like, and that book stuck with me, and I read it so many times as a kid. It was just compulsive,
Well,
and
I think
That
isn't
was
it
one of
like
mine. That was one of my earliest Stephen King books, and I've got a real soft spot for it.
yeah, I just think it's a cool book, and it's just visually and just
well, there's something like King can be very good at those sort of scenes of like cathartic violence, where something just happens and
when the guy puts
everything.
his arm in the garbage disposal,
Yeah, oh,
like in his
Jesus. Yeah,
wife's underwear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I loved that idea of psychic compulsion, but that like it causes issues for the person, like the dad is getting like aneurysms and like little
Right.
mini
Right.
stress events, like
Yeah.
it's not without consequence, that idea of being able to control people. And I mean I have that something of that in my new book. It's that idea of if you can control people and make them do things, like just because you can doesn't mean you should, but it also makes your life
Right.
very easy. If you can make people do things just because you want them to,
Right.
is a
How
very
do you feel about
like,
the Firestarter movie? I'm sorry, I just have to ask.
terrible. I mean, which one? They're all bad. And that the sci-fi movie that came out in the late 90s, early
The
2000s.
sequel,
Yeah, with Marguerite Moreau, who was also in Queen of the Damned. She was just really stinking up. I don't know who her agent was, but it was like, stop. Yeah,
she
it was
was
terrible.
a Lawnmower Man too. No.
I was like, was she? I feel like she might have been too young for that, but
Possibly.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah. No.
Wait, one more question, Davis.
Yeah.
Don't cut me off, you son of a.
don't. Go ahead,
No,
John.
okay.
No,
Anybody
go ahead,
want
John.
to pay
Go ahead, John.
any? Oh my god. What is it? What? What? This is going to be the takeaway quote when he shows the thing to the.
Damn straight.
Yeah.
The hook.
If like, who would you like to pay it forward to? You know what I mean? Like who are the newer writers you're reading and you think, oh man, I really, keep an eye on this person.
That's a great question, honestly.
Think he's like, nobody. I hate everybody.
Only me.
Certainly not Phil Gillette.
Well, no, he's more. He's been around. He's old news.
He's old stuff. He's an old guy.
He's an old guy. I don't know who's coming up. Trying to think who's like young, new,
use that.
hot, fresh.
Use it at your own discretion, or new to you, even.
New to me. Well, so one of my good friends, his name is Brandon Perez Sanchez, and he is part of a production team called Monster Movie Makeup. And he and my brother and a few of his friends and his partner all have been doing these ragtag movies, filmed in Providence. So the first one came out a few years ago. It's called Death Drop Gorgeous, and it was a drag queen slasher movie, all with like real drag queens from the area, and they all filmed in real locations. They made the movie on a real shoestring budget. There is a meat grinder glory hole scene that's pretty impressive. And there's a whole kind of Elizabeth Bathory bathing in the blood of twinks kind of thing. And it's a lot of fun. Actually, Phil did help film parts of it. And so I've been friends with Brandon for like 20 plus years, and he just has endless ideas, and he's gotten really serious about writing scripts. So he did that when he did a folk horror one called Saint Drogo that was filmed in P-Town in the dead of winter, and it's kind of like a cult cabal sacrificing people on the beach to this weird god. Very cool. Super gay, so you have to be ready for super gay. Like really cool, beautifully shot. And now they're working on their third one called Jenny Greenteeth, I believe Queen of the Rats is the current title, and that is kind of based on the early 2000s Providence, and it's going to be a mobsters monsters situation with art kids in the mill spaces and mobsters and monsters also in those mill spaces. And so he's also written some fiction, long fiction, and he and I have worked a couple tables together recently. And so he wrote a book called The White Bishop with Aaron Borgard that is like a sea horror, like body horror, historical fiction, men on ships book. And then he just came out with a kind of a cryptid book, which I am blanking on the name of right now, which is no good because I'm supposed to be 1 second.
It happens.
Happens to Mike all the time.
It does.
Yeah.
He's not even sure where he is right now.
I'm not even going to deny it. Nope.
Well, I wanted to give I can picture the cover, but I am blanking on the proper title. One moment, please. It's called Recessive Nature. And that's like a hunters and cryptids in the woods.
Cool.
And they're really fun. Like he does a good job of being all over the genre in that same way of having that versatility of like historical fiction, contemporary stuff, and kind of everything in between, and monsters and things like that. And I think he just has a really fun and just loves horror in all of its stripes. And I think he does a great job. And I'm excited to see what they do next, for sure. And there's definitely a character based on me in the new movie, so that's fun.
Nice.
And I did some background work. I'm in a couple of the noise shows, sneering at people like I used to back then. But yeah, because I used to work for a rumored to be a mob owned suit store for a long time. And so back then I would go to all these underground shows after work, but I was always in a suit. So I was like this weird lady, and I had to wear stiletto, like mandatory heels at work. So I was just like a lady in a suit and heels, like in this dingy warehouse. Like just the thing, like it was just like my thing. But it was usually just because I was coming from work. But I was
Mandatory
just
heels.
yeah, which is weird
Wow.
because they were also short. So I was so much taller than everybody.
I just feel like this is like every episode of Miami Vice you ever
Yes.
saw. There was a woman like this in whatever club they went into.
Though when I had to be in some of the commercials, they made me take the shoes off when you couldn't see my feet because I was so much taller than they were. So then they're like, well, this looks ridiculous. Now take off your shoes. Like, I don't know what they want. But I guess we can, the owner died, so I can talk more about him now, I guess, in public. But it was a colorful time. Weirdly, I haven't done any mobster stories yet, but they're in there.
Yet is the key word.
Well,
Yeah.
I have one more question for you. It's a question I like to ask a lot of the people that I interview. And the question is this: what does success mean to you in your mind? What has to happen, Victoria, in order for you to feel successful? And maybe you're already there, or maybe you feel like you're halfway there, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think success is tricky. One of the nice things, I was just talking about this recently, because again, I work in that art organization,
Right.
and a lot of the artists in that are like my parents' age or older. And the thing I really like about, just kind of hanging out with a lot of different age ranges and things is that like working in the arts, and I think writing is one of these, as is in the arts, there's no timeline. These are things you can do until you drop dead at your desk or got an
Right.
easel or whatever. So it's not like the success that, like, obviously, like making money and being, well known and well read and people, is definitely a plus, and no one's gonna say no to that.
Right.
But I feel like one of the coolest things about being any kind of a creative person is that there's something compulsive about it's like almost a body movement, like it's something that you have to do. There's something, it's like, yeah, writing is often challenging, getting anything made, getting anything read, the amount of stuff, there's a lot of it that's not very fun, but yeah, there's something that still keeps us doing it. And there's an itch that that itch to tell stories or to make things or to work on something, or that you feel guilty if you're not doing it. And that, I think, even when you don't want to, and it's like, well, you don't have to. It's like, nah, I got to do something. They're like,
I
no,
call it masochism.
yeah, there is, but it's like an itchy little thing. They're like, I gotta get to work. I gotta do something. Or like, that would be a good idea. And you're just like storing these little ideas or scribbling things that mean nothing later, for like, oh, this is good stuff. And then you're like, look at it, you're like, I don't know what this means. This is different. But at the time I thought it was really good. But I think but there's something, I don't know, that I find to be exciting about that. Like, it's annoying, but it's exciting, and it's a fire in the belly, and it keeps you moving, and it keeps you just active. Like, you want to be part of something, you want to make something. And I think anytime you're like reading or reading I always say it's like a dialogue. Like, somebody wrote this, I'm reading it, we're kind of doing this now. And the other way, if I'm writing it,
Yeah.
you want that conversation to be happening. And I think same thing with art. You're making something, but only you want other people to see it and to have some relationship with it, whether they like it or not. And I always say, like, the coolest thing in the world is if someone like buys something of yours, to be like, I'm going to put this on my wall, I'm going to look at it, I like it enough, I want to look at it all the time. Like, it's just awesome. Like, it's just
Yeah.
the biggest feeling in the world. And I feel that way about books too. And like, anyone who takes the time to buy it or read it, it means like the world, because we have endless options. And like, I know my TBR pile is endless. And like, the amount of people I know, and I want to be like, oh, I'm trying to read everyone's books. Like, it's so hard. So the fact that anything gets read, I don't know. I like all of that. That's the
Yeah.
part that I feel is successful, that I still enjoy doing it, and I would like to keep doing it. That feels to me like a success, because so many of us are just not happy where we are, not happy with what we're doing, or kind of filled with that desire, like the amount of people who are like, this is my New Year's resolution and I'm going to start doing this year. And I always say, like, you may actually not want to do that. You just might like the idea of yourself doing that. I feel like a lot of people with
Good point.
writing specifically, I think they like the idea that they could do that. But when they have the time, they don't. And I always say, you know, like, if you aren't finding that time, you maybe don't want to do it. And that's okay too. Like,
Yeah.
don't do it then. You know, none of this anyone has to do. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have to be writing about monsters all the time. I've chosen to do this. Like, so I think that's okay. And then, or to try something and realize it's not for you, or, you know, I was, you know, even in the writing classes, it's like, I always just say, like, you're gonna need a tough skin for this industry. Like, you need to get ready to get rejected constantly, like, you know, all the time. And it just is part of it. And then also when you get accepted, that also brings up a whole new set of things, you know.
And then you can be on Mike's show.
Right.
Yeah.
See,
No.
actually, the real success is that you answered my email and let me come on here. Like, you know.
Well, you know,
This,
it's good.
Is this success?
I was gonna say it's great practice, because now that you've been on this show, you know, you can get on some of the good ones. So
Yeah, my next step, the world. Well, no, but I also think for why I even reached out, because I've, you know, been you know, listening over the years, and, you know a lot of the clowns that are on your guest panels here, like Mr. Langan and such.
you fit right in.
But I was like, yeah, I could see a lot of people of that ilk not necessarily thinking my fiction is for them, or that it's more for women, or that, like, again, because I am often like a younger woman in a lot of these circles and at a lot of the horror panels and stuff, that I do think there's often a stigma about women writers, and like men reading women writers in general, and especially like when you get a little urban fantasy kind of tag on that
Sure.
can be very off-putting to male readers. But I mean, I guess I would ask this then, did you feel like did you feel comfortable reading it as a man, or did it feel like women's fiction to you? Or
Yeah,
guess that
no,
would be
no,
my question.
absolutely. It just was a book I really enjoyed, if you're asking me, you know, and
I have to get these stiletto heels off. Hang on.
It's a safe space. That's why you only see from here on up. Who knows what's happening downtown?
What's happening
I just
downtown?
assume there's no bottoms. Just shoes.
yeah, and I love where it went, and the reason why these killings were happening and everything. And I was just like, yeah, I love the book very much. So, and I think everyone should read it, and yeah, that's why I said, yeah, please come on the show. So,
Great. Yeah, because I think that's often the challenge. Yeah, just with like women in this biz in general, that can often be, or I'll be on panels and it's like, you know, I'm there like essentially to be the woman on the panel, you know, and it's like, well, that's a woman, you know. So I think that can be the challenging part within this this specific genre writing, that you don't necessarily want to look like it's exclusively for any quadrant. I don't know, I would like, so, and I remember early on someone had asked about some blurbs and things, and they're like, wow, you have a lot of like men give you blurbs, and it's like, well, unfortunately no, a lot of men, you know? But also I was like, well, I think that was important to me, because I think a lot of times the things I write and the way they're marketed, they wouldn't necessarily be seen, or I could see men not thinking it would be for them, and I wouldn't want that to be the case, I guess.
and I'm sure it's frustrating, but you know, like Laird blurbed this book, and that is important. That's basically telling other men, look, I love this, you will too, you know, and women too. But it's in a way saying this is not just a chick book, you know, this is a great book, read it.
Yeah,
So,
he's been great. He's actually blurbed all 3 of my books, now I think
nice.
about it, and John did one of them.
Well,
I think
you know,
Parasite Life.
Yeah, you can blurb my first one.
1 out of 2 ain't bad. It's
Yeah, and
not
Paul Paul did my second one.
And then you were like, can you do this third one? And I was like, listen,
Yeah, and on Celine Shade, I mean, the real feather in my cap, like childhood lifetime achievement, was that Poppy Z. Bright agreed to do a blurb, which was like such a big deal. And then I also had Aaron Borgard give a blurb on this one because, again, like he's pretty extreme, but he was like, "Hey, you get pretty gross in there." It's like, "Well, thank you, sir."
That's a compliment.
No, I had a not that long ago. Actually, I think it was this past StokerCon. I had a conversation with Sarah Langan, and she was talking about, when she started the early 2000s, she said, there were a bunch of women who were writing horror along with me, and she was like, where are they? Like they and she so she was, I don't know, like I don't think, well, I don't know what she was, if she was saying there was something. What am I trying to say? She was not saying there's like a conspiracy theory, they're trying to keep the ladies down, but she was also saying this is not a forgiving genre for women. It hasn't been. And I know that a number of younger or newer writers, people like Liz Karen and that, CJ Lead sort of look at her as kind of, I think, like a sort of quasi mentor figure, like I've been around for 20 years, and if you want to do that, like because obviously that's what everybody wants to do. So I think that's, yeah. So if Laird Barron, the Ron Swanson of horror, wants to be like, I have read this book, it is all right, it's manly, then that's what you do, right?
Well, especially that first one where it's like teen girls, like, but I was surprised by the amount of men that read that book and were genuinely moved by it or bothered by it, or like the amount of times I had people reach out and they're like, yeah, I have issues with my mom and this was a hard book, or like, oh, my mom died and we were not on good terms and I had to put this one down, or this was,
Yeah.
like, because it's a pretty universal, like, mother's issues type book. And I was surprised by the amount of men who were really impacted by it and bothered by it. And again, it was like, oh, thanks, guys. Like,
but that gets back to what you were saying before about monsters allowing you to go further in talking about certain very human issues or situations, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it lets you be a little more honest in certain ways, because you are dealing with extremes. And so you're, again, we don't know what we would do in a lot of these extreme situations. We all like to think we'd be the person who like takes charge, does the right thing, grabs the weapon, stays noble or whatever, but we don't know. And I always think about that with the Night of the Living Dead and the Barbara character, and how frustrating she is, and how everyone finds her frustrating because she's just like catatonic the whole time, and she's just crying, and everyone has to like slap her to get her to do stuff, and how annoying she is. But every time I watch that, I'm like, yeah, but the reality is I feel like a lot more people would be like her than they realize, and especially if they just like watch their brother get killed. It's like, I think like we like to think we're all going to be the hero in a story, but I don't think anyone, like not everyone, people can be very, very ordinary and human, and like sometimes, freezing up is the human response.
There's a great moment in Paul's novel Survivor Song where they meet the women who are the protagonists meet these two kids on bikes, and the kids like say, we thought we were the main characters, but they've kind of realized, no, we're really just the secondary characters. And there's a whole bunch of meta stuff going on, obviously, but it's also just like that realization that, you are not the most important person in what's going on at this particular moment.
Well, and that's one of my favorite things about cosmic fiction in general, is that like that kind of nihilism that goes through it, but also that like that idea of like death of self, or like ego death kind of thing, of that whole, there's no guarantee that you will know what's going on, nor are you important enough to know what's going on. And if you survive this, most likely you're gonna be nuts after, and or just haunted by whatever just happened.
I know I bring
and
this
you're
up,
not gonna have like some kind of expert, or like a Van Helsing with like a book, or that idea that there's gonna be an expert to explain this and help you through. And that's like what I in this book I was trying to do, that where like everyone thinks that she's like a chosen one type, and it's a character who definitely does not want anything to do with that sort of thing. And I had read a couple of the mainstream romantasy books that came out, and I really struggled with them. No offense to him. I was really hoping to like just devour them, but I just found them pretty poorly written and not very good. And one of the things I really, really dislike is characters that are described by their like physical attractive traits in lieu of character, like in personality. It's like their personality is like he has lilac eyes and abs, and you're like, okay, like that. It's everyone's so appearance driven, and in a way that like they don't have any personalities at all. And so that's specifically why I wanted the love interest in this book, that like everyone thinks he's kind of creepy and like, not particularly handsome, and she's not particularly, like everyone's kind of ordinary, and they're just kind of plugging along and like doing their jobs, and they're doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and it's life and death stuff, and a lot of them are trained, so it is like you're just doing your job. So it's like, I don't know, it's less about being the hero and more about just doing the right thing, or what you feel is the right thing, and making them like, in that way more ordinary in a fantastical scenario.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that. And just I like characters to feel very real, even in fantastical situations. And that's my problem in fantasy, when they don't feel real.
Yeah. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I am glad you emailed me, and it's been wonderful talking with you.
Yeah, no, this is fun. As I said, I mean, I'm just blah, blah, blah all the
Oh,
time,
no,
so.
you're the guest.
He's
You're supposed
afraid
to
if
be.
he doesn't say that Laird Barron will show up for him.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be great. I haven't talked to him in a while. It'd be like a guest star.
No, I mean he'll show up behind him with
Oh.
not even a knife, like a bone, like a piece of sharpened bone
Just
or something.
with a mammoth or some kind of
Right, exactly,
femur.
a mammoth. Right, exactly.
Just
No, it's like a bear.
Jessica
like a bear
usually
femur.
Jessica usually warns me ahead of time, John, so I'm usually good. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you for being on the show. And the name of the book is Selene Shade, Resurrectionist for Hire.
Mm-hmm.
It's available in Kindle. It's available in print.
I'm in every Barnes and Noble.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a very it's a pretty low price on Kindle if you're a Kindle person. I think it's $5.99, like, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good to see you too, John. I wanted to real quick before we go. You've got
you have a new book.
Yeah, you got a collection.
I have nothing. These are not the droids you're looking for.
I know it had a long title. I can't remember. Tell us the title again.
Yeah.
So there'll be a new collection called Lost in the Dark and Other Excursions, which will be out in the spring of 25. And a new novel, I hope, which will be out called The Cleaving Stone, which will be out in spring of 26.
Right.
The Cleaving Stone. What is it about?
It's a rom-com.
Bleeding or cleaving?
Cleaving.
Yes.
It's about a famous problematic guy who disappears and seems dead, and then his children, his adult children, get a message that no, he's not dead and he wants to see them. So they stay home, they ignore him. It's a short, basically it's like 2 pages long.
Does he want to sacrifice them on the Cleaving Stone?
No, the Cleaving Stone is a whole other thing, but it relates to something, a minor, teeny tiny detail from The Fisherman that I've managed to just blow out to 100,000 words. So
that sounds about right. That's
what I do.
You do love a long walk.
Your fans will really like that. In all seriousness, they love.
People do
stuff.
say to me, they're like, yeah, it takes you like Paul is always like, it takes you 5,000 words to write your name. So
yeah, well, you've got a lot of middle names, it's not your fault. No, but that's one of my favorite things about your writing, though, is the story within a story within a story kind of thing.
Yeah.
I quite liked the movie Nope because of that, like the whole. And it's funny because a lot of people disliked the veering off with the chimpanzee attack
Yeah,
kid
yeah,
TV
yeah. Or
show and
even
all
the
that.
yeah.
But that whole scene made me go and check. I thought that it had been based on a short story because it felt like that felt so much more
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a literary fiction thing of like that just veering completely off for a while.
Yeah.
And it's something I quite liked about that movie is
Well, I
that it
see that.
felt really cosmic and also literary in its style. Whereas
Yeah,
I did not like Us. Is that what? With the scissors?
Yeah, I didn't like
Yeah,
it.
And the doubles?
It was just a little
I
too ridiculous.
Yeah, it just
liked
was
Us.
messy. That
I
was
liked
messy.
Us. I think I liked Nope more, but I think Nope is also Jaws. I think
Yeah.
it's also it's basically like at the end when the lunatic filmmaker
yeah.
shows up, you know, and he's and you're like, what? He's like the Quint figure, you know. It's just instead of a boat, he has a film camera.
Yeah, no, what I love, and yeah, that barfs all the stuff up onto their house and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was quite charmed with that one, and I liked the weirdness of the family of horse trainers. Again, it felt very literary. It felt more like a book than a movie to me.
Yeah, it's so wonderfully strange. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that, and I have to be honest, I'm a big fan of Us too. I get why people are like, what? I just look at it as like a Twilight Zone episode that just kind of like ran amok. You know, like
Yeah,
you could see this.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I can
There's
see
a
that.
You
lot
could
of
see this.
movies I feel like needed to be tightened up in the draft, like in the
Yeah, yeah.
script way. We're like, ooh, this felt like it should have been tightened. I mean, I have a huge problem. I mean, this is a whole other thing with like Ari Aster, who I don't love as much as people like with Hereditary and Midsummer. But I just feel like he needs to get tightened up. Like
just-
like I feel like the scripts needed to be tighter because I
I
think
am
he's all
not.
vibe and I love
Yeah,
his
exactly.
vibe, but the stories don't like they're not strong. Like he's all mood, but I think people like him because of the mood. But it's like, man, imagine if that story was tight.
Yeah, no,
This would
I think
be
that
amazing.
Midsummer, there were parts of it that were beautiful, that were gorgeously shot, but it's a movie that like the more I look at it, like the less there is. And
Well, and the killing
kind,
off scene of everybody, and yeah, and the
it's
whole like his whole campaign that it's not a horror movie and it was about breakups and
yeah,
I don't know.
Oh, brother.
where Hereditary, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's same thing. There are parts of it that are brilliantly shot, but the scariest moment is really in the first maybe 5 minutes, I feel like, where you see mom's ghost in the corner and you're like, oh, and then it never, like, that's it. It peaked early. And
Yeah, and it was an unsettling movie for sure, but yeah, there was just some tone like the idea that I feel like had we been put in a little bit of a different time frame, like that the senile cult mother lived with them.
yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I can't imagine she was normal. Like, think about her boxes. They open the top box. It's like, here's a photo album of my cult. Like, it was not
Yeah.
secret at all. And all the cross stitching was like, all like, hail Satan, blah, blah, blah. Like, it was very obvious. And
Yeah,
so, I don't know.
it's a bad sign when you see stuff like that.
Well, I just like wonder if that movie had been moved in time a little bit and like you're living with your creepy senile grandmother who thinks that you have possessed with like whatever their Satan god is, but you're in the wrong body and want to kill you to get you or
Well,
into your
it's
brother.
interesting.
Like that
Like,
would be a very strange movie.
yeah, no, but like many years ago, Nick Mamatas did some interview, right, where he was like, a lot of new writers love like the twist ending. And he and I did, and it's true. When I used to teach college creative writing classes, inevitably you would get those. And part of me thinks it's just something that new writers go through. They want to try out that mechanism. And Nick was like, okay, what if you put the twist ending in the middle? Or what if the twist ending is what begins the story and we have
Well, I
to
was
deal
saying
with
before about the zigzag of like setting
Yeah.
someone up where they think they know what's happening and then just knocking them
So
completely off of
it's
their
true, right? Like what if it's an open secret that grandma is senile and she's this senile old Satanist, you know, and she's constantly trying to kill the little girl, and it's like almost funny, you know, that in a very dark kind of way.
and then there's a
Jesus
relief when she dies because they think it's
right, you're
done
like, oh,
now.
thank God, right? And then it's like, no, now things get really bad and really freaky.
Right, which is like the Ring. Like I really liked the American Ring remake is one of the few remakes I think
Verbinski,
did a good job
Yeah.
because it added just some other visual elements and things. But I always like I saw that in the theater in like a opening night, full to the brim, like old
yeah.
days kind of theater when it was just completely full. And like when she comes out of the TV, the amount of people that were standing and screaming and just losing their mind. And like I had seen the original
That's
already, so
great.
it's
Yeah,
like I
yeah,
knew what we were dealing with. But I still think one of the most effective things in that is the subversive or the subversion of the like East Coast West Coast ghost rules, because she gets the body out of the well and she's like, don't worry,
Right,
I
right,
got her, because that's so much part of like that kind of
right,
Anglo-Western ghost stories. It's like, get those bones,
right,
you sacred ground, or like whatever, like
right,
that
right.
idea of will release the soul. And then then he's like, wait, you're not like
You
Not
did
supposed to
shouldn't
do
what?
have
that.
done that, you know, in her
Why would
face
you
being
do
like,
that?
what? Like, and I found that idea of that
Yeah.
that zigzag, like, no, it's good. And remember, like, music is swelling and it's this very like
Right,
poignant special moment. And he's like, no, that bitch is evil. And it's like,
You
Why would you do that?
listen, you thought you were the hero. You just fucked everything up.
yeah, now there's just ghosts
Right.
everywhere because of you. But I like that idea of like, you think that you know the story that you're in and you're in a different story, because I think
Yeah.
there's something very true in life about that and again, always thinking you're making the right choices, you're doing things for the right reasons, or that people make sense or whatever. And just that I could see the thing with twists, but the twists are tricky because it's a cheap gag, because if you
Yeah.
don't nail a twist, now it feels like, especially at the end, it's going to feel like a waste of time for the
Right.
person who just invested the time into the book or the movie.
Yeah.
And if it's a crummy enough twist, it won't hold up on like re-watching it or something
Yeah.
like that. Whereas like, again, I don't love Shyamalan, like he's annoying, like, just in general.
Right.
But I'll say Sixth Sense was a tight twist, because you
Yeah.
go back and watch it and it holds up under
Yeah,
rewatches, and
it's
you're like,
set
oh
up,
yeah, no
yeah.
one ever does actually talk to him,
Yeah.
or like
Rewatching it does pay off. Yeah.
yeah,
and
and I think a
there's-
good twist, that's what needs to happen, that you can watch it again, and even if you know what's going to happen, you're seeing,
Right,
know,
well,
like
there's some-
Psycho is a good example, like knowing that, his mother's dead. I mean, I guess spoiler alert.
It's been a while since that
You
movie
just
came out.
keep doing this.
But
Have
that
you no
idea, like
mercy?
that, like then you hear the voice and you know it's him, and like the movement
yeah.
and like that actually, it works. So I think a twist can work, but it is a lot to ride on that you can do it. And like it also, you need to leave little red herrings all along, so that if you read it again or watch it again, you can see those
Right.
little winkies, like, oh, the clues were there if I knew where to look, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I also think there's something to be said for the not a twist. Like, because I think so often, especially like in horror movies and stuff now, you just like anticipate that there's going to be
Right.
one.
Where is the
Yeah.
twist coming? Yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost a twist to not do a twist. Like,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I
because you're
think
But
like
there is
Midsommar could have been a good movie if they knew what they were getting into. If they were like, yeah, there's this death cult, we're gonna go check them.
yeah. Do you want to
We're
research
gonna go.
this
Yeah,
weird
you wanna
cult?
be part. And
Aw, there he is.
and the
Yeah.
Phil has really
Hey,
He's-
close that
he's
door.
really
He's gotten shorter. Yeah.
he's gotten shorter. Yeah.
Chris,
But,
we're here too.
There's a sci-fi movie called The 13th Floor. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I think I have seen that one. Is it early 2000 or like
no, it's
older?
1999. It came out the same time as The Matrix, so it bombed because
Yeah, is Gretchen Mol
Yes,
in it, maybe?
yes,
And the
yes.
guy who was the love interest in that Gina Davis movie where
I-
she's like a lady spy.
I don't
Long Kiss
think-
Goodnight. I think it's the bad guy in that is the guy. Anyways, yes, I obviously have seen this.
Yeah,
Continue.
well, I don't want to. It's such a great movie in my view that I don't, even though it's 1999, I don't want to give away what the twist is, but it holds up on that rewatch, like you were talking
Right.
about. You're like, oh, I get it now. And so anyway, everybody who are watching and listening later now and later, I've put a link to Celine's book in the show notes. And like I said, if you're a Kindle person, you got to buy it. It's only $5.99. So
I know it's less than a sandwich these
That's
days.
right.
That's
That's
right.
right.
And it comes with onion rings.
Yes, it's like a sandwich for your mind.
Yeah. Thank you for being on the show. This was a really fun conversation. So,
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I love chatting with you guys.
John, it's good to see you. Everybody remember that John's got that collection coming out next year. And John, please let me
Don't
know.
worry,
when-
I'm going to be flogging this thing
Good.
mercilessly.
Well, when there's a pre-order link, is what I was going to say. If you think about it, let me know so I can tell the audience.
I've been tied up like every Sunday for the past several months. I've been just had one thing or another going on, and now I'm
Sure.
free.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Well,
Here we are in the winter months.
Damn
the
it.
long,
So what he's saying is
winter
he's going to
nights.
be showing up for all of these.
yeah,
Everything's
that's
like,
right.
hey, everybody.
He wants
what's
to give me
going
time
on?
to. He wants to give me time to prepare myself and
They're like,
steal my
hey,
nerves.
Dr. Nick. And I'm like, hey, let's all sign these non-disclosure forms.
Seriously, as much as I tease John is a dear friend, and he's a really wonderful, fantastic writer. And I know a lot of people are just really happy that you've got these 2 books coming out in the next couple of years. So
There's a lot of weird people out there. Quite,
I
quite
know,
frankly,
all these
I-
sicko super
thankfully
fans.
so,
Yeah.
John. Thankfully so.
Yeah, you
No,
really
but I
could.
mean, honestly, John, I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't taken that lid reactor course with you
That's
all
what- yeah.
those years ago.
But it wasn't just me. That was like, when I think about that, what do we have? Like, it was me and it was Paul. Did you do the one? It was me and Paul and Sarah. And
Wait, you guys took a
maybe-
class together?
No, we did this fundraising thing for the Shirley Jackson Awards when
Oh,
the
okay.
reactor was still going.
Yeah.
And we offered a 4-week writing class. And it was, man, I taught 1 week and Sarah taught 1 week and Paul taught 1 week and maybe Brett Cox taught a week. I can't.
It might have been.
can't
I don't know. This was a
remember.
long time ago. This was.
Yeah, and
I don't even remember.
and so yeah, it was just give us your money and we'll give it to the Shirley Jackson Awards and we'll try not to waste your time.
Yeah, I think it was
And,
maybe 2012.
Yeah, it was
think it was
about
probably
10 or 12
2012.
years ago. Yeah.
And then
And,
I had done a short story on it. And then your note was like, I think this is pretty much good to go. You could send this out. And I was like, what? I've never sent out a short story in my life. Like I had no,
Yeah,
and I just was like, oh, and you're like, yeah, I think this is pretty much done. Send it out.
But seriously, yeah, that's great. That kind of encouragement from someone like John is just it's
get
really
this.
really important.
So
Yeah.
I sent it out to
Yeah.
one place that had a call that I found, and I sent it out, and it was accepted. And I was like, "Oh, I guess this is just how it'll go from now." And I've never gotten a rejection since. No, but, no, but it was like I don't think I would have thought to that I was ready to be doing that yet, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that it gave him doing that had given me the confidence, and so ever since, and again, whenever I teach writing workshops, one of the big things I do is pretty much say the same. I have people write cover letters. I have them be looking at
absolutely.
open calls.
Absolutely.
I have them just naturally getting everything into a standard format so that
Yeah.
it's kind of ready to go. And then it's like, yeah, worst case scenario, you
And
get a no.
That's such an
send it
interesting
somewhere else.
that's such a great thing, an interesting thing to say. And I say this to my wife, who's a high school English teacher. You have no idea, the kids that you help, that the ripples that down through the years, that how that helps other people. Look, John did this for you, and now you're doing it for other people. They're going to go on to do it for other people.
Yep, and I've had a couple students who did have stuff get published, and they like sent me a thing and were like, "Oh my god, I got into this thing, or here
That's
it's in
nice.
this
That's great.
magazine." Like
Yeah.
I would have never, and it's like, yeah, just and like I totally credit you for that, John, because I think I probably would have just been working on things for who knows how long after that, like without like having the confidence to put
Well,
myself out
it's
there.
I because on the one hand, I want to say you're such a talent. Don't be ridiculous. On the other hand, I get it. I do get it that it's hard to know. It's hard to like sometimes you just need the push to like, okay, I'm just going to do this. What the hell? And yeah, there's enough for everybody, right? I mean, it's not like pie. Everybody can have, everybody can have. I think everybody can have success, and if there is a difference, and it's maybe not fair, but like when I was a kid, like 30 years ago, I would go to like readings and workshops and stuff with like, all these like, I don't know, big sort of literary writers who were mostly like, William Styron, people like that, Norman Mailer, whatever. And there was always this sense of competition. And there was always this sense that like, there is not enough room for all of us, buddy. And one of honestly, the very first ReaderCon I went to way back in 2003, I met Ellen Datlow, and she was just like, when are you going to send me a story? And it was just a very lovely, generous gesture, and she didn't have to do that. And sometimes genre people can be a little too pat on the back, self-congratulatory, but nonetheless, I have found that to be the case, that people are generally supportive of each other.
It's not
until you get really successful, then they stab you in the back. But
right. Well, you're gonna wait. You gotta bide your time.
Right, exactly.
It's a long game.
I'm waiting till Paul gets movie number 2, and then just wait.
But yeah, I think you just you gotta prime it. But
right, exactly.
Yeah, you're right, John.
Recording.
It's not a zero-sum world that we're. It's not a zero-sum game. Whether you're talking about writing or artistry, or artists, or a podcast. It's not a zero-sum game.
Well, you can add more chairs to the table. I think that idea of it being so limited in it's such an exclusive club, is just a bummer. It's just not a fun way to do things.
I don't want to live that way, I don't want to live
or that idea of once you're there, then you pull the ladder up and not let anybody else. It just doesn't really make sense. Right. And, especially when you go to like a lot of writer events and things, there's a lot of really cool people. And like, especially you read their work and it's great. You want to give them a shout out. You want them to have
when you've got a success, they are genuinely happy for you. There's not this jealous feeling,
Right. And it's tough because everyone is often like competing there are a certain amount of spots and things. But again, there's also many options and not everybody's going to get it. And you won't, it's great if somebody who's never sent anything in before is the one who gets it. That's also really great. Like, I think that, that there is a lot of space for everybody. And I mean, the main thing is you want the work to be good. You want them to be there because their work is good and not because they are, I don't know, like famous
like me.
Something.
Yeah.
Right. Well, a name, just a name to put on the front of that anthology.
I was thinking more like this,
Oh, the face.
Well, speaking of a non-zero-sum world, I was on another podcast recently, and
you betrayed your own podcast.
Well, I got invited.
He's a poly podcaster.
You cheated on your own. Oh, you have an open relationship with this podcast.
He interviewed me. Okay, it wasn't the other way around. I was on the Weird House podcast. Nick Boddick. So
sure.
A nice guy. I've got a link to that in the show notes, as well as obviously Selene's book. Victoria's book. Selene is in the title.
That's her book.
You are Selene.
Yeah, and also have a link to Mark had to go, but his upcoming book, the pre-order, and Pete Rollick has a new book, The Cthulhu Heresy. We've got a link to that, and then Anno Carcosa, 1 Year Under Twin Suns by Kelly Young. So all of those are in the show notes, folks. So
Pete is where? He's at the Miami Book Fair or something like that, or
I don't know where he was last week, but this week he's sick. Something's going around.
Oh, okay.
Several of my panelists are just sick. So
I had COVID a month and a half ago, and I am still not past it. I'm negative. I'm tested negative, but I was by the time they figured it out, I couldn't get Paxlovid, and so I just have like the COVID dumbs. I just the example I'm giving is I was writing the date last month, and I wrote November, and then I was like, is that how you spell November? And then I was like, is November a word? Is that what we call this month? Is it November? Oh, right, I guess it is November. So
I hope it's not one of those long COVID situations, more of a medium COVID, and
the thing is you have to wait like 3 months, like a 3 month, and because the Mayo Clinic actually has a really good page on long COVID. And they're like, yeah, we're still not sure about everything, but here's what we know, and your symptoms have to persist for 3 months. So
I had a friend. I've got one of my oldest friends got COVID, and the long COVID. It was like 2 years.
yeah,
I felt so bad for
yeah.
him. He couldn't work.
And I mean,
nothing.
I can't go back to work in the poll as long as I have COVID. So, you know.
There you go. So
I'm sorry, working the pole like as a stripper?
Yeah, that's, I just look, daddy's got to put money on the table. And
Hey.
I'm just saying, when I've got COVID, I can't do the
Victoria,
moves.
do not stripper shame here. Okay.
No,
judgment.
no.
I'm kidding.
No, my
Anyway,
imagination is full right now.
That's a
well,
bad
when you
joke,
said
right?
earlier, whenever you said earlier, yeah, I've got that tattoo on my butt, and you guys will just have to think about that. I was like, no, okay.
Nope, now you're gonna have to think about
That's
John
not what she
Right.
wrote.
That's my
dancing.
response. That's my
And I guess
that's my
you can
answer.
decide which is better. Which would you
Between the two of us, we've implanted those images in Mike's head.
Oh
He's
man,
like,
thank
"Butt
you
tattoo
so much.
Or laying it on a
Yeah,
pole.
we're like a little sandwich of
Yeah,
intrusive
if my wife
thoughts. You
if
do
my
not
wife
want-
watches this, she'll be like saying, "No, you're not going to be thinking about a tattoo on anyone's butt." No. So
But she'll be
John
like,
didn't
"Oh,
even
but
tell you about the tattoo he has on his butt.
right." But your wife's gonna be like, "Oh, but you are gonna think about John laying it on the pole, aren't you?" Like a big
Just that
pink
squeaky sound
lollipop.
of skin on the like metal.
As I slowly and sadly spiral down.
why are you doing this to me?
I like to think it's in briefs, and also you've kept your socks on.
Now I'm trying to imagine what song would be playing. Shit.
Mustang Sally.
I was thinking Funky Town, but take your pick.
Thanks, Sally.
Funky sound.
Now imagine him lip syncing the words.
It's much faster. It's a much faster than I was expecting you would want to go for that.
Well, that's what makes it funny is it's going so fast while I
Well-
slowly slide.
Well, this episode de-escalated quickly. So
Like John down the book.
We turn the pole. It just slowly spirals squeakily to the sticky mat.
jeez. Always enjoy it when you can make it, John. Look.
I'll be here all the time, people, all the time.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you again, Victoria. And
Yes, this
everyone,
was
please pick up
lovely.
this book.
Yes.
Celine-
Do so.
Celine Shade, Resurrectionist for Hire. So,
Awesome.
yeah. Anyway, I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving, and thanks for being with us on this Sunday, Thanksgiving weekend Sunday. So, and we'll
Yeah.
see you next time.
Sounds good. Yep. And try to stay healthy, everybody.